Okay, I'm going to call to order the school committee meeting of February 7th, 2022. And because we have remote members of the committee, we'll first identify ourselves, which I should have been doing for the last year and a half or 2 years, but identify who's actually present. So we'll start with Warren. Just indicate that you're present at the meeting.
I am present.
Bob Munch, present.
Christine Morrow, present.
Bob Vaughn,
Veronica Fenton, present.
and remotely.
Megan Kirby, present.
David Rimler, present.
Very good, thank you. And our first order of business is the hearing of public comment. I know we have a big audience, and I think they give other reasons, but there is no public comment. I have no correspondence. We have the board minutes for January 31st.
Move to accept the minutes of January 31st. I will second the motion.
Okay. So Veronica Fenton made the motion and Christine Morrow seconded. Is there any discussion? These need to be roll call votes. Veronica?
Veronica Fenton, aye.
Christine?
Christine Morrow, aye.
Bob Munch, aye.
Morgan Cass, aye.
David?
David Rimler, aye.
Yeah.
Megan Kirby, aye.
Bob Vaughn, aye. Okay, I just do want to make a quick note that tomorrow night we have a meeting at 5:30 to discuss COVID reopening grant possibilities. And my intent is not to have public comment. I think the 7 members of the committee and perhaps if members from the Tri-Town Board of Health come, we'll have enough voices to have the conversation be among us. Otherwise, we would have it'd be a long time before we got discussing the issues ahead of us. So just to let people know. So now I'm going to turn this over to the superintendent.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to do a brief superintendent's report that focuses first on some highlights and recognitions. First, I want to say congratulations to a couple of Lmmhs students, Genevieve Collins and Finn Jolly. They were both selected to participate in the Massachusetts Music Educators Association's All-State Chorus. The All-State concert takes place on Saturday, March 5th at Symphony Hall in Boston. And this is the first time in a number of years that our district has had 2 students successfully audition and receive selection to the All-State Music Festival. So we're quite proud of that. And I know that there's been a lot of hard work over at Lmmhs helping to prepare them. So congratulations all the way around. And yesterday I had the opportunity to visit Lmmhs and spend some time with the robotics team, watching them do some virtual trial runs to get ready for an upcoming competition this weekend at Andover High School, where they'll be competing. And so we put a few pictures of the robot and a video of it trying to complete its challenge online, so you can check that out at our social media sites. They don't have a name for the robot yet, and Mr. Cote jokingly said, it's not the worst robot that we had, so that might be like a great name either for like a rock band, or it might even be the name for the robot. I'm not sure yet, but it was fun either way to check it out and see not the worst robot they've ever had. So with that, we're going to move into the meat of the meeting for the night, which is a presentation from the middle and high school folks to share budgets from department heads and administrators from the high school and middle schools. Before we start, Melissa, I know that you had wanted to just give a couple of quick comments, reminders, overview, and then whenever you're ready, let me know and I'll share my screen, and we'll start with the Lmmhs budget and then we'll do technology follow.
Yeah, so I do want to say that all of the budget documents that are presented here are now in a folder that you have access to, and they'll be updated. We'll add things in as we progress through the schedule of the budget, but that is available, and that's where we're going to house all of the budget documents, including the large PDF document of the full booklet. Booklet. And I think that's really it.
Yeah, and that's particularly important, just because the online folder that will share these documents in will have any changes to the documents in real time. When we send copies around, they're kind of static and they don't always get updated. So, we want to make sure that that's where you want to go for the latest and greatest. Again, we'll also try to send out a reminder if there's any changes, just so you know to hold up there. Because again, having up-to-date information is not, plus it's no good if no one knows anything's changed there. So, but we feel with our Google workflow, that's the best way to keep everybody up to speed. So we'll start now with the budget presentation from Lmmhs. I'm going to share my screen, so just give me a moment, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Knivel. Just get into the presenter view here. I will tell you, or just tell me when you need to advance the slides.
Go ahead and advance. So, good evening. I'm Mike Knivel, the principal of Lenox Memorial Middle and High School. We're here to present to you our budget that was built zero-based, that comes in at 2.64% increase over all the departments. So you'll see some departments going up and down as we were zero-based. And the people, the wonderful educators behind me are a huge part of the process, and they're here to answer any questions. I will begin with the first department, which is administration, which basically is the principal's office. We are down just a little more than 4%. The reason for that is the salary. We had some crossover salary last year between our new assistant principal, Brent Betty, and Mr. Cogswell, who is retiring. So there's a decrease in the salary line. And we're also tightening the belt a little bit on our, supplies, postage, and equipment. As you can see that Dr. Goslin has brought a lot of Google Sheets to us and a lot of Google documents that's saving us some costs across the district. Do you have any questions? Okay, moving on to art. Art is coming in at a little less than 9%. I noticed that they put a 5 up there, but I think if you look in your budget book, it's closer to 9. Again, we had a retirement of a longtime educator, Leslie John Roach, and she was replaced by Ms. Bermudez. Alexa Bermudez in our art department. This art covers visual and graphic arts along with the wood shop in this line. So the main reduction comes in at the salary line, and the main increase comes from field trips, where we basically cut them out of the budget for a little bit of 21 and a little bit of 22. The Duffin Theater is coming in at a little more than 5% increase. Contractual salary increases and hardware and software to keep the theater as technology increases. We wish to stay in pace with our Duffin for lighting and sound. In the English department, we see an increase of 2.6%. Salaries are all contractual obligations. Professional development has increased. Field trips have increased. And textbooks are increasing for reading and across the grade levels. Health education, we have our contractual salary obligations, and then hardware and software for the supplies is actually going to our middle school health program. And it's an app for teen health from Lenox. So it's going to contemporize our health program. Instructional services is increasing by 3.46%. Inside of that, we have salary costs are heading up higher, along with professional development has decreased, supplies have decreased. Assemblies are being put back in because we're hoping next year we can bring our student body together and bring in some diversity, equity, inclusion work. The SRO has a contractual increase, and we've actually needed his help a little more than we have in the past, especially with our traffic. And then curriculum development is close to $2,000 increase because we're anticipating some new courses to follow with our work with the Pathways program. In math, they're almost level, about a 1% increase. Again, we have salary obligations to meet. They're lowering the textbook and software line, and they're increasing the hardware line, which brings the classroom to life for the teachers with a new set of iPads that will project on the screen, and they can circulate the room and start working with students. The middle school has its own department. Basically, that's for middle school assemblies, along with some of their activities that are not covered through departmental work. So stipends are contractual obligations. Professional development has been reduced, and $3,000 has been added to field trips. Included in there is the 8th grade celebration in their class trip. In music, another almost level department, just a 0.42% increase. We're meeting all contractual obligations. Supplies and equipment have been reduced. Field trips added back in, and textbooks for new music. It's actually not textbooks, it's sheet music. In health and wellness, you'll see a 1.26% increase, and everything remains level contractually. Salaries go up, and then supplies and equipment, just a modest $225 increase. In our science and technology, we have a 3.23 increase. We have salaries, contractual obligations met, professional development is reduced, as we think that the state will hold firm for a little bit, but news is coming out that it may not, hold firm with their curriculum. But, field trips are being anticipated, and then new textbooks for $1,000, which is really going for our new business teacher, Heather McNeese, to fulfill our pathway program for business. In our social studies department, you'll see a 5.55 increase. Professional development, including speakers, is added, $500, almost $600. Field trips are brought back in. That includes with the English department, Washington, D.C., the humanities trip, and the Tenement Museum. Supplies and equipment is going up, and a new textbook for our grade 11 and grade 10. World language department, again, salaries, no changes there. Professional development has been reduced. field trips are coming back in as they were removed for $5,000. And textbook and software is $9,735. That includes our online Rosetta Stone for 1 year and their other purchases. The library is looking at a 3.85 increase. Contractual obligations met with the salary. Professional development is up just $40. And supplies and equipment are just raising by $720. So you'll see a modest increase there. Supplies will bring us new processing materials for new text and also some new furniture as we're thinking about doing away with the center island of computers. And so it's a little redundant with our iPad initiative. Athletic. For guidance. For guidance, we have a 5.88. Mainly, this is all salary, as the registrar became the data manager for the district. So there was a salary increase there. There was a reduction in professional development and a reduction in supplies. That's mainly a redescribed position for the district. And then in athletics, there's a 12.77 increase. Stipends remain with contractual obligations. We are bringing on a new sport. You've heard about that this fall. We are hosting boys lacrosse. Professional development and dues is increasing. We've anticipated the number. Supplies and equipment, which includes uniforms as well as all the balls and bats and everything else we need to field the team. And then transportation is a decrease with a contract that I believe David, Melissa worked on, that really is going to be a benefit for us to have a prepaid contract for athletics. To give a plug to the public, we're always looking for bus drivers. Even if it isn't us, or it's right down the street.
Bands too.
Other student activities is going up 14.6.06. Really, we're looking at funding fully 97 stipends. So those are clubs and activities and extracurriculars. Field trips, we've added back in, removed from previous years. And by a field trip, we mean competition. So like, as Dr. Goslin says, robotics is going to Andover next weekend. Instead of it tapping on the science department, all student activities come out of here. So when the quiz team goes to Springfield and we hire a full bus, that money comes out of there. So we put some more money back in there, expecting our kids to be very active next fall. Supplies and equipment come down, and we're hoping it all balances out. Health services is an increase of 16.68%. Again, we're meeting all our contractual obligations with the salary, some of which was funded in the past by ESSER, so that's coming back into our budget. Professional development, modest increase of $112. And then supplies and equipment, we're actually trying to hold the line and use what we have, and we're able to reduce that a little bit. And then the last one is other districts. Again, it's down by 10%, but that's in hope that we can reduce the transportation costs to other districts, and that includes our vocational programming. Sometimes we have a student that even wants to go to a specialized program like McCann. I believe it's out of body that McCann offers that the Conic and PHS does not, so that's an increase in their transportation costs. So as I began, we end up with $147,585 above last year, a 2.64 increase overall.
Thank you. I just want to, before we have the presentations, I do want to, just recognize that we lost a couple of our former teachers in the last 2 weeks. Richard Lampron was a phys ed teacher at Morris and Cameron School for 35 years, used to run the community center. He passed away 2 weeks ago. And then Bart Natoli, who also taught in the schools for many years as a woodshop teacher in high school, just passed away this week. So I just wanted to recognize those because those were two longtime educators in Lenox who passed away. Some of you would work with. Some of you might not have because so many new folks.
Are there any questions for the high school administrators or department heads?
So just on form of how we want to do this, so are we also going to hear from each department heads, or did you just do that? Because I have more questions from having gone through the book and kind of don't want to monopolize it all, but if there's more presentations, I'll wait and then ask those then. If they don't get answered.
Yeah, we'll go department by department.
Is that what's happening next? Okay, so you just did the summary, then we're digging in. Okay, perfect. I've got my notes and I may get answered and then I can just keep walking.
This graphic is, shows you that teacher, instructional staff, is even the paraprofessionals are 83% of the budget. Administration is 5%, guidance is 6%, athletics is 4%, and people services 2%. Expenditures comparisons, self-explanatory. Instructional cost is our largest piece of the pie, so to speak.
And that's the end of that presentation that I have here. Well, so the separate presentations for the departments, I don't have those.
No, but if you want,
Just go back to them.
I mean, you can go back to them.
Sure.
They're prepared with 2 minutes, or you can just ask questions.
I'd love to hear the presentations. We've done that past years and I find it really brings a lot to our understanding what the department. I think it'd be great.
So it starts on page 39 of our big budget book.
So, Art? Okay,
Get back there. I'm Jonathan King, I'm the Fine Arts Department Chairman. And so, as we know, we lost Leslie John Roach to retirement over last year, so we're very excited about what we're moving forward to. Curricular changes are very exciting. And Mrs. Roman Leger and Ms. Benitez are moving forward. Happy to have field trips back in the budget this year. It's a large part of what they do. The field trips that they do take are really based on the curriculum, and they like to go to local venues as much as possible, like the Clark or like Rockwell, and venues like that. As far as budgetary goes, that's really the big thing is the field trips coming back in. Most excited about that, and to support changes in curriculum that are happening next year.
Any questions from Mr. King?
So we'll get music later.
Beautiful later.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll get music, theater, drama later. Yeah.
These are two different.
Okay, gotcha.
So any questions for Mr. Cade so far?
I actually have one.
Sure.
So this is a little bit of my pre-COVID understanding of something that happens traditionally in Lenox, which is an art field trip that sometimes morphed into an international trip. I know nothing like that has happened at all. Is there anything in the budget that relates to support? Because I know those are typically privately funded. But I don't know.
To a
Kind
large
of
art
digging
field,
through all the lines. What's that?
to a large art field, like a international, like.
I think,
Correct.
yeah, international.
I don't think there's anything like that planned. There's nothing further in the budget for that. Mr. Knight will probably answer that better than I can, but.
Yeah, I mean, with Miss Bermuda's being second year next year, I mean, she definitely would maybe even stretch to go to Boston, but that would be covered, and we would make sure all students could go if they were financially out of reach.
So for right now, as far as what you have in this budget, the field trips cover all students, and there is not, it's a question
Yeah, the
of
plan is
some
to
pay
cover-
and some others pay. So
So
that's,
there's no plan to have anybody pay for a field trip within the arts department.
okay, thank you.
And the Dufferin Theater, Mr. Phillips is here.
Good evening. The Dufferin Theater is a little bit of a unique entity in LMHS. In as much as it supports a lot of different functions in the school. From presentations to movies to some things that I've heard about happening in the past that I'm hoping are gonna happen again in the future, like the robotics team doing their stuff in here as well. There's also testing and a bunch of other things. So most of the budget for the Duffin is geared toward repair and improvement. We have aging curtains and aging equipment that can enhance the experience if they were replaced. Not to mention there's some other cost savings if we replace our curtains with inherently flame retardant materials. We don't have to worry about treating them for ever until next time we have to replace them. So we save that in our budget as well. But the bulk of what we do supports the students. It supports the other departments that exist. There's a production department, production class that can be enhanced through use of theater equipment that we plan on including in our expenditure. But the bottom line is really just keeping the theater moving forward and repairing and replacing aging components within that, just to make sure that we continue to support the student body as best as we possibly can.
So I had a question on that because under your hardware equipment, $4,500. And it's not $4,500 so much as you have a list of priority list, which goes well beyond
Absolutely.
probably 3 or 4 times that amount. I'm just wondering, would we expect then that you would start with the front fill speakers and then the headphone amps and that you would work your way down that list, and then another year we might see the next group of things, or?
Yes, that would be the plan. Plan would be, I mean, my approach was put everything in the budget and then work my way backwards within that. Finding out what the limitations are within the budget. So putting it in a priority list helps to serve the best need for what is budgetarily available now.
Okay.
So yeah, so that would be the approach.
And I also have a question, and Dr. Goslin, it may be more systemic and not necessarily under Mr. Phillips, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
Hi, who's on the report. So I actually was around when the students did a pretty amazing presentation seeking an increase in theater opportunities so that we could have more production classes. I mean, we had a whole video and they really kind of showed their talents. And then I know COVID impacts this stuff, but the question I have is, we always had Sal, who stepped in his role, and doing more of the technical stuff, we worked very integrally with the students on lots of different things, as well as administration around assemblies and just, and I'm sure you are everywhere when you're asked. But relative to instruction and support around drama, I don't see anything in this. So there was a position, I think it was a full TE, an FTE, but it might have been part-time. And that person's retired, and I just don't know where we're headed with that. Certainly that's an important question about how are we integrating drama in a more forefront way. I don't see it here, and I know no one's looking to say, let's up the budget, but in my mind, I feel like that's a really important detraction from something that we have really worked hard for, and I know the students have just really have seen some amazing work and interdepartmental work, talking about, you know, we did cabaret, I mean, you guys did a lot of work to make that happen, and had a lot of conversations, and I think theater in a community as rich with arts as we are, we know how much we're able to have conversations and education and learning across disciplines. We talk about DEI, I mean, what better way to really dig into difficult topics than in our theater programs? So I'm kind of wondering, is that coming back? Because we're gonna get yelled at for asking for that, but I think we need it, and I'm really hoping that there's a way we're gonna have a plan to get that back. I think it's a rich part of our students' experiences.
Yeah, we would love to have it back. Mr. Knivel and I had super countless meetings around this topic in the school year. Trying to, one, find a teacher to, or someone in the community to kind of head that up. And it's proven very difficult. Again, I don't know if it's just the market that exists today, if it was COVID, maybe it's a combination of both. And you know, Mr. Phillips has really stepped up, I think, and offered his services to help with the kids, offering a workshop type class where they're working on some theatrical production elements, both with acting and also overall production in and of itself. But we would certainly love to bring that back. It's in the it's always been in the works. Again, it's just, you know, Shakespeare's a great opportunity, but we really wanted to have something that was an in-house program too, and the students want it. You know, we know that they've requested it, and they also share with us that they would hate to lose that. So it is something that we want to work on. Mr. Kyle, was there anything that I'm missing?
It's in the program, and really the decision to go with Mr. Phillips for this year is actually his talent. He's about ready to put on a straight play this spring with all the students in the various sections working together on the same product, just like, you know, in the past, Mr. Capillo. And we're about to kick off the spring musical for the high school within a week. I think we're very close. We have 2 candidates vying for the position, and we're we're actually including students in the interview process. And it's funny, the students have voiced their you know, what they're looking for, and you know, you're going to see musical theater back this spring. And then, if you're wondering where the placeholder is, it's in other student activities.
Okay.
So where Shakespeare and the musical, that total number there, I want to say is around 28,000.
Okay.
And it includes what we contracted in the past for that drama program.
So at this point, looking at it more as a stipended, similar to the ability coaches, others, like with the funding for that. And then the Shakespeare program is a grant, like a partnership with Shakespeare, we pay them for the services to come in.
Yes.
That seems like a pretty wonderful, efficient way to do that, and thank you. So
We,
that was what I was looking for, and I had a lot of people ask the question. So it looks like there has not been a decision to actually post a position for a teaching fellow or whatever, but there are people in the community that actually asked me about it, and I always direct them to employment and posting and say, if I see a posting, I'll send it out, because that's the way that should happen. But I feel there might be some untapped resources within our community of people who left Broadway and came to my neighborhood. I can just tell you that.
Yes.
And are in that industry. So there may be some things that we just, and maybe they're a new pool, I don't know, but I'm just thrilled, because I really do think that for the students, I couldn't ever convince one of my kids to be in a musical, but I just have always loved seeing the kids and I think many of the community members show up for plays and performances of the students. And I think it's a great opportunity for our community to see what they're supporting. So thank you for that.
And if you know folks, please, pass their names along to Mr. Knibel and I. I think one of the things we wrestled with is that there are some folks in the community who have this great experience, like you said, maybe on Broadway, right? But being locked into, some of the working with children and what that requires in their schedule was something that they didn't want to necessarily commit to at this time. So, but if there are others out there.
It's a morning commitment,
Mhm.
It's a morning commitment.
morning commitment, 5 days a week, that's where the drama class runs. So it's-
Okay, but then there's after school because there's.
And there's
performance.
after school, yeah, so it's a
So-
split shift. It takes a special
Well,
person.
I guess it's an interesting conversation for another time and outside of my purview, but the concept of arts, music, theater, history, I mean, we don't always necessarily have to be quite so aligned, right? I mean, if someone has the skills and knowledge and ability to do a multidisciplinary approach, it makes me wonder, right? Like, when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and curriculum, sometimes we have people that come in with an opportunity to teach other things. So my hope is that maybe we'll see it as a person making a commitment to us and we make a commitment to them, and we can really have some longevity out of it.
Yeah.
I know that's not where we're at today, but that's kind of a hopeful comment on my part, we always seem to keep all of our teachers and faculty and people really busy, so.
Mr. Phillips, there was a program concern you had listed about budgetary swing. I wasn't sure I knew where you were going with that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, that's it's really a holdover from Al. I spent a lot of time speaking with Al before I came on board, and after I came on board last week. I'd really like to see, and Al did as well, to see more in-house productions happen and have a way for the budget to swing in that direction to support more of almost a season of shows like a traditional theater would have, and be able to support the tech help that is required for that. And the school does a really good job supporting that right now, when they're paid people coming in and things like that. But this would be kind of an internally produced thing first, and as it creates revenue, then it would be self-sustaining at that point. So that, I think that's the real concept there is just some wider vision, I guess, in terms of budget as it pertains to productions in the theater.
All right, thank you.
And if I can follow up on that, I do know that there are a number of theater organizations that don't have a theater home. And so they utilize Shakespeare and Company, or they utilize BCC. So there's some question about that wouldn't, but maybe we don't have what they need. But I think there is opportunity for a number of community-based organizations that have a pay-as-you-go when they do productions. So that's a good thought.
And we're always looking for partners. Again, we're trying to really get entrepreneurial with the use of the Duffin, and look at that as a potential revenue stream. And I know that, Stefan and I had talked about this earlier in the year, and I'm really excited about that. So, if we know of these, we would love to have more conversations.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone, I'm Ben Weaver representing English, and I'll try to keep it pretty quick and just turn it over to questions. The bulk of what we do is pretty not very exciting. It's pretty much the standard what you would have seen from a few years ago. Yeah, it's very like the normal. So a lot of it's really student focused on delivering academic excellence. So the large ticket items there are the textbooks, where we like to have teachers to innovate with their curriculum, looking to adapt it and change it on a regular basis, bringing in speakers to enliven the classroom when we can. Two major kind of newish things that are in there, or at least are a focus of how we're using some of our fundings. One is this English-wide, and then including social studies as well, focus on remediation due to teaching the experience of being taught under COVID restrictions. So we're focusing on language and writing this year, and really we're imagining it's going to take us a couple of years to plan it properly and implement some things. So we've dedicated some monies to some resources. We try to organize ourselves. Some of that is going to come in this year, even getting supported. We're really thankful for that. Some of it's actual like classroom material, some of it's online work. that we would use. So that's one kind of aspect. And then the other one is, I mean, you're gonna hear this from a lot of people, re-implementing our field trips, connecting them to curriculum. And I gotta say, because I've been planning some of them over the last couple of weeks, it is not an easy process right now. Because I had someone tell me today, well, we're not really sure what the rules are gonna be in May. And so, and I think a lot of the people in this room who organize that kind of stuff, it's just adding another layer of kind of complexity to it, which I think we've heard from our students loud and clear that they really want those kinds of experiences back. We're really excited about trying to make them happen as soon as we can. And even some smaller things where I think one thing, for example, that's in there is Fielding, who is new to us, but worked for many years in the 7th grade writing contest in Berkshire County. Would like to bring it to Lenox. We would bring 7th graders from around the county, perhaps even do it this year. So things like that, where the curriculum isn't just like us in the classroom doing writing remediation, we're making it kind of enlivened. So that's kind of the upshot of what I have, and happy to take questions. I think a number of the things that are our initiatives also coordinate with social studies as well, because we tend to do a lot of the grade level planning for the academically related field trips and experiences. And you'll notice the funding to on your point, the idea is that students perhaps have to cover meals, but everything else is covered. So transportation, tickets, admission prices, things like that. So the idea is that it shouldn't be.
And that's in the budget now, but or it's not. It is
Not in
the
this
budget.
year, but
Yeah.
it's in the one for next year. Yes. That,
Right,
you-
going forward. So
going
what
forward.
we're looking at includes that students need a minimal amount of contribution.
exactly.
And do we still have the ability to help those students out in a way that respects privacy and dignity?
Yes, we do. We
Because
get a
we
list.
have had funds in the past.
Yeah, we get a list from guidance and
Okay.
make sure the funds that we have cash on hand.
So that answers the question, but thank you, because I think, I mean, a little bit different than some of our trips that are international, though not 100% different. I think Lenox did not have a trip to Washington DC for most of the time I remember, and then it was brought in, and I think it's such an important opportunity to have so many conversations, and there's such a richness of. I was able to take family last February, right before COVID, to the, I always get it wrong, but the African American History and Culture Museum, and it was just such a fabulous experience to take family there and do that, and lots of other DC things. So for students who don't have that opportunity within their families, I think we integrate it, directly into our curriculum. And I think it's essential. And when people say, oh, well, that's, being present and experiencing these things and seeing our own presentation at the African American Museum with Du Bois and Elizabeth Freeman and others makes a direct connection to our students when they come back home, which I think is also really cool. So it's really important. And I think students' dignity and ability to attend those things is essential. Thank you.
Yeah, they've got the largest, probably singular ask across all departments. And so we're really excited to bring that back. Dr. Weaver and I spoke on the phone recently for almost an hour or so, trying to figure out the contours of some of this. Not so much around folks who can pay or can't pay, but more around what this will look like in COVID, because many of the sites are saying that you have to assure them that 100% of the participants are vaccinated. And so we can't always do that in all of our courses. So now we have to try to figure out how do we, navigate that. So that might be something we can pick up at the TLC subcommittee and have a conversation around.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to get back to Dr. Weaver and folks and let them have some guidance in terms of how to proceed with trips so that we can do that this year. So.
Planning that trip with Lisa Westpfizer over the years, there was a component where families contributed, but it was very much offset by the district monies to pay for the trip. But families paid what they could pay. So it was different for every family, but the goal of the trip was 100% participation.
You ever need a chaperone, I'll go back.
But another thing to think about with that trip, the hours involved is that was an in-house planned trip. So a lot of schools will say, they'll pick up the phone to a tour company and say, take us here, but it was completely developed.
And integrated with the.
Exactly.
Yeah,
with,
and
you know,
intimately.
it was months, and when we did go, and we hope to go back, it was just a phenomenal trip for the kids and the staff.
And thank you for doing that.
We're always looking for
I
chaperones.
made a note.
Also,
What's that?
always looking for chaperones too. so.
Call me.
Any other questions pertaining to English department? All right, we'll move forward on to health.
Do you mind if I stand up?
No.
Not at all.
Come forward if you want.
You wanna come forward a little?
I just feel like I was talking to the back of everybody's heads, so just, okay, so my name is Lauren McCarthy, the department chair for health and wellness. So there's not a ton of changes with what we're doing in the classroom, but we did lost Jeannie Teasdale to retirement. And we brought on Erin Malloy as our new teacher, who's a great asset to our department. She's doing some of the same things Jeannie's doing, but a few of the changes are the software that she's gonna be planning on using with the students. So she has some different programs that she'd like to use with our, as Mr. Khan was saying, with our middle school students as well as with our high school students. The bulk of the budget for the health education is using, the money to replace or update books that we use, or in her case, the software she's gonna use, and then with her family and consumer science classes, purchasing food, or the different equipment she needs for the cooking and that kind of stuff that she does in there, and then also for her yoga, updating the mats and the blocks, and the straps and things that she needs for that yoga class. So, I'd say, yeah, the major things are some of the software that she's choosing to use with the middle school and the high schoolers. And then everything else is kind of going the same with purchasing food and updating equipment.
We'll see you again, right, for the
Yeah.
department? Yep, okay, great.
This is a question for Melissa. It seems like every department has a software line. Do those all roll up into one single software line somewhere?
So the majority of them have rolled up into the technology department for this new budget coming up in 23. There are some that remained within the smaller department budgets for reasons like that, that software that they're going to use and doesn't need to be managed on a district-wide level. So you'll see a few lines with software in the high school, middle and high school budget, but not.
Is it like in lieu of textbooks, because of everything, so the students have their tech platform, and so now we're using online instead of an actual physical
In
book?
many cases, yes.
And the kids can't say, but I lost my worksheet, Mom.
So I'll give you an example. So for the remediation that we're doing, we're looking at an online service. So the first thing I did, I went to Randy and said, is this something we already have? Do I need to request it? Because his money's already spoken for, right? So, it would be good if I requested it as a very English specific thing. I guess if certain things long-term, maybe they end up rolling into each other, but in terms of meeting a immediate need, like that's why there's that.
Well, that's kind of what's driving to it. If the tech department knows what's out there, it helps them a great deal.
Yeah.
Somebody gets stranded with something they bought for Windows 10, Windows 10 is kind of gone.
And that's the ultimate goal, is just to really to park more and more of these in tech, right? But every software program, we took a top to bottom look at every single one of them with Randy, and made sure that they weren't duplicating another effort, and that we also had the technology to support them. So sometimes what can happen is folks might say, oh, I really want this program. Someone says, sure, go ahead and buy it. You buy it, now you get it, and you realize that you don't have the right, Chromebook to run it. And so now, that's a headache. And so we wanted to make sure that not only that we were being fiscally prudent, not redundant, but also that we have the support to run these things, whether it was the bandwidth to run it and or the right hardware to run these things. So trying to increase a lot more coordination and communication with technology to support that kind of program, which I really believe is the ultimate, reason to have instructional technology.
And the department may want licenses for software. And the tech department will know how many licenses we've purchased and how many are being used, and do we have any excess without having to purchase again.
And the other thing we do on the back end is kind of a end of year kind of audit where we look and say, all right, so we bought this, did we use it? And to what degree, right? And so, and if someone says, oh, well, I need to always have it, we said, well, it's true, but we only see like 3 kids use it out of the, 45 kids that are on your roster, well, then that's problematic and maybe you don't need it as much as you thought. So then we just have a conversation around some of those pieces. All right, let's move into math.
Yeah, to that end, Dave Pugh, math department chair. Randy's been easily accessible. We've had a lot of conversations around software and technology and trying to decrease costs, not just for our department, but across the school and just being more efficient. But for instance, we were using IXL over about the year and a half. We had COVID. It's a nice tool that a few teachers utilize, but we find coming back in person learning this year, it's used far less. So we're purchasing far less licenses for that next year. One thing we were coming into COVID, we were considering smart boards. We had a lot of conversation in our department around smart boards, using smart boards with instruction or iPads. The timing was with COVID, one thing, as chair of the department, let me see firsthand as I used it, the smart boards we used that Mike was able to purchase a couple for us during COVID was the way to teach during COVID remotely. It was absolutely amazing. But coming back in person now, I'm finding myself using the smart board far less. Because what I like to do in a classroom as the other teachers is be present with the students, not in front of them speaking, but be next to them working, having my knee on the floor, being shoulder to shoulder working on our math together. So, the smart board has more of a traditional role, I would say, within the classroom. Whereas an iPad, for which we're going to be purchasing a few this year, integrated into the middle school and high school, is a tool that I used pre-COVID that allows you to physically be with the students in class, maneuver around, share work instantaneously, share student work, get feedback on work, take pictures of work, present them, write on them, save the files, upload them. It's a really, really efficient tool in the classroom that allows the teachers to really be engaged with the students, with them, and be able to just flip of a switch, you need to go in a different direction, you can. So, or if you need to show a different way to solve a problem, or a student solved the problem completely by surprise another way and you wanted to show it to the class. And it really frees up the student not to have to get in front of the class and present the work. You can just ask them, I do, can I take a picture of work? Yeah, sure, Mr. Pugh. Present it to the class, and sometimes I'll let them present from their seat, or we'll talk about it. So it's a fabulous tool, it's a very low cost investment. And that's really the increase we see in our budget. Textbooks, we're pretty well set for a while. We spent a lot of money on Big Ideas a few years ago. Big Ideas is something we're using grades 6 through 10 now. And we've got a nice consistent curriculum base for 5 grades prior to the junior year. So we're in really good shape with textbooks. As a department, I think we're in pretty good shape. Any questions?
Thank you. We'll be back again.
Yes.
I have plenty of questions then.
All right, let's move over to music.
I'm Jonathan Kay, the department chair for fine arts once again. Budgetarily, we had a change in the line to supplies and equipment. The biggest reason for that, and that was driven by myself. I've been so well supported for the last 20 years that there's nothing really at this point that I need. There are some things that I would like. I mean, I'd love a 9-foot marimba. If you've ever been in my current music room, there's no room for a 9-foot marimba. So equipment wise, that kind of thing, we're in really good shape, and that's why that line's been reduced. Textbooks have gone up to where they used to be. Some of that money got shifted into software licenses for a program called the online practice platform called Smart Music that we used a lot over during the pandemic. And it worked out great, and we continue using that in the 6th grade. Be a great addition to the 6th grade music. So I am bringing that forward out of that just to the 6th grade band students. So that's gone back to normal pre-pandemic, pre-COVID levels as far as textbooks and printed sheet music goes. Class-wise, we're doing the same things we've always done. The chorus and jazz band meet before school. Recently started a brass ensemble. It's meeting after school 1 day a week, and band going forward. Any questions?
So I have a question. It's
Sure.
not gonna shock you at all where it's coming from. And I've neglected to actually ask this question about Morris. So I think there's probably not a kid in the universe that doesn't think about that moment when they're in Morris school and the person from Keen Music, whatever the heck their name is, comes in and says, oh, do you want a flute? Do you want a drum? Do you want to, you sign up and you lease the instrument or whatever. And then whether the student actually begins to really enjoy that instrument and begin to actually play is usually what you get in middle school. Students who are already playing the instrument are those who are continuing to go forward. But my understanding is we've always done that in a leased equipment where the equipment company comes in and then the family signs up.
Right.
What resources are we putting in place for students who don't have the ability to either purchase, acquire, and or maintain a lease or something?
I can say honestly, we've never turned a student away. If a student needs an instrument, wants to play an instrument, we find them one. And
Okay,
I have a collection of relatively new flutes, clarinets, trumpets over at the high school. And I think Mrs. Pollard at the elementary school does as well. And if kids want to play an instrument, we find one for them.
thank you for that. Actually, you've kind of really reacted visually to that. That actually made me really happy because I do think that there's a strain, some students know if they bring home that paper.
Yeah.
The parent is, it goes beyond just how that person feels, but what's happening at home and the stress, and I think we know,
Now, again, that's one of the.
so thank you for that, and I think it's important to be able to let people know.
Yeah, one of the strengths of our district is we can recognize those kids before they need to know there's a problem. Like, we'll know who it is that may want to play and may doesn't, Mrs. Pollard, and, we'll know who those kids are and make sure that happens for them.
And thank you for that, and I think it's something, again,
Some of those
let people know.
donations, some of those donations come from alumni.
Yeah,
So, they go off to college and the instrument's sitting at home and then, the parent asks them, what are you gonna do with this? And they'll come in and they'll donate. So shout out to the alumni that do that.
great, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment rather than ask a question here, but I think the whole committee gets a newsletter from Karen
Yes.
that I believe is being put out by one of your students this year.
Yeah.
Tegan, I think maybe.
Yeah, Tegan.
Yeah, Tegan Parr. And I know that's a great highlight when I see that come across. And it lets me know when you've got something happening or she's got something happening, it's great. So
Yeah, she's a great spearheading that.
it's been very good.
Thank you.
Guess we get Laura again.
So as you can see, there's not like a huge change in what we're asking for in the budget, like the contractual obligations. Basically, the majority of our budget goes towards updating and replacing any equipment that we use. And that goes for our traditional equipment, so things we do out in the gym, like we've been trying to incorporate new badminton nets because that's a really popular unit and a lot of students like to use those and it's a great game to get lots of students involved. So every year we've kind of been trying to bring in 2 new nets and then we keep the old ones. And when we go outside in the spring, we can have them play outdoor badminton and we can bring the older nets out there. So that's more of our traditional sport replacement. We also have our fitness room. So we have money that goes towards updating, replacing equipment that's in there. And as the equipment that we have in our room gets a little older, sometimes it's naturally gonna need a little bit more updating. So we asked for some money to go into that, because that really is a great asset to our school. Like, we are so fortunate to have the equipment we have in there. Because not only do our students use it, but then some staff members will come in before school, after school, they use it. We have our after school weight room, and we've actually included before school weight room hours this year. So students have the ability to come in and work out before or after school. So that is just an awesome thing that we have. We're very fortunate that we can offer that around school hours and also during PE class. High schoolers and 8th graders are allowed to choose to do that as opposed to our traditional activity, if that's something they'd like. So it really includes everybody. Everyone can find something they like doing. So yeah, we're trying to basically just add equipment, add new things to try to get everyone involved. So right now we added an Olympic unit with the Winter Olympics going on, and we have physical activities, we have mental activities, we have something for everybody. So we really like to be able to update the equipment to go along with how things updating the world, and then add new things so everybody can feel included in some way.
Any questions for Laura?
I have sort of, I'm not, it might be for you, I'm not sure it's for. So family consumer science is listed in here. And then there's also a conversation about business. So is that in, I don't know what department that lives in or how that's.
Business eventually will become its own department, but it's included in science and technology.
So the consumer science, how does that differentiate from? I think I'm actually thinking about it with
So the.
my young people saying, how did I learn about credit and leases and, you know, all the
Yes.
stuff that the kids sit down with it, you know?
So that's really part of what Heather McNeese teaches in business. So
Okay.
next year, the course is going to be called Intro to Business and, or Intro to Finance. And it's going to include personal finance.
Okay, cool.
I know we're kind of replacing the Intro to Business with Intro to Finance. So it's, the kids kind of know going in that it is going to include personal finance, maintaining a house and car and insurance and all that before they take a venture on. Second half of the year is going to be that entrepreneurship.
So that's a high school course,
It's a high
not a
school
middle school course.
And will that be a required or elected?
It is on right now. The entry course, Strategies for Success, is kind of a precursor to, you know, it's, that will be required.
So Mike, are you saying that family consumer science will come out of the phys ed budget next year?
No, so family consumer science belongs to phys, to health and wellness. It's an elective, it's a PE elective for upperclassmen in the high school. It includes nutrition, cooking. It's in the new health room. So Karen Malloy, who teaches our middle school health, she runs yoga and family consumer science, which are PE electives.
Gotcha.
Underclassmen can take them concurrently, but freshmen and sophomore physical ed, health and wellness, as we call it, is required because it includes the health units.
Gotcha. So you said nutrition, for example, grocery shopping and understanding what's in your food, budgeting, that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
so ninth and tenth graders in our health and wellness also get health units throughout the year, so you generally once per quarter for about 2 weeks, the ninth and tenth graders in regular health and wellness will get a health unit. So one of the units we do is nutrition, so they get their nutrition
Okay,
as ninth and tenth graders in that, in one of our individual health units. But then if they went on to do family and consumer science as 11th and 12th grade, they would get more nutrition information.
thanks. Not trying to dial into it, I just was, because I know that business component is there, and it's just the consumer science was making me try to figure out where that goes. Thank you.
Yeah, typically like business lives in its own like other area, they call it BIT, it's business and instruction technology.
Yeah.
And so it's right here, like business classes, accounting, you know, finance, you know, economics, like those are the. All right, science and technology.
Hi, I'm Lori Weatherby, representing science. A lot of actually what I was going to say just got said by Mr. Knievel. Because part of our department right now includes intro to finance and strategies for success. And Heather McNeese is new to the school and she's doing an unbelievably fantastic job with these kids. So one of the short-term goals, if you look through the program, is that we'd like to separate and have her be her own department. But for right now, she is part of the science tech department. And so the textbook part, as Mike said, as Travis said, will likely go to her. Another thing that she's done, and Brooke Kaminsky, so another person in the science department, they've both been involved in the Designated Innovative Pathways program. So I see a lot of head nodding, so I want to explain it. But we're looking to expand there as well. Heather is going to do some expansion in her business field. Brooke is looking to expand a health career pathway where she's working with Southern New Hampshire University in an anatomy and physiology course, meaning that the students who take that course will get dual enrollment. We are looking into a nursing program. None of this is in place yet because we're still in the grant application process. We're about 2/3 of the way through. So we're hopeful that the grant is going to pay for a lot of what we will be needing. We're also looking to begin an AP Bio course that would also tie in with the Innovative Pathways Health Program. And we're gonna send Ms. Altieri, the biology teacher right now, to an AP biology training this summer. And we haven't, it's not really in there what she might need for the AP bio course.
It's
So
in my, yeah, it's in my instructional services line.
all right, so that's good. That'll cover the instructional services line. Really, the rest, the professional development has been decreased because a lot of the professional development is occurring online now because of COVID. So we've reduced that. We have a couple of people going out to the National Science Conference, but primarily it's online, and so it's reduced travel costs. And the field trips is just the 1,000 that was removed from the other two budgets. And that is primarily, I have to read this because I haven't done this. This is Brooke Kaminsky with her AP Environmental Sciences class. And she takes them to, oh, please. Do you find with masks, the worst thing for me is that I want to lift my finger, but I can move. I can't do
We're
it.
never going back to that.
Oh my God, I know, it's awful. So she takes them on a field trip to. Really?
I think it's the water treatment.
It is the water treatment plant, and I wanted to read like the details. and now I can't find it.
Fortunately, it's an all there.
It's a water treatment plant. And she does a water survey study with macroinvertebrates that never works when she does it on site at Lenox, but always works there. So would like to continue to take that. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Question on the Pathways program,
Yes.
as it shapes up or comes together, how will it fit with the broader curriculum? Like, at what point does a student potentially join it, and what comes off their plate so that this can be on it?
So ideally, the Pathways program will begin in middle school. And actually coming up in the March half day is one big event where the 8th grade for a number of years has hosted a career fair where generally every 8th grader can choose to interview three of our participants, you know, because working with our partners along with Casey Lennon from 8th grade, she has filled the cafeteria with various careers in business, and they send reps to speak live to our kids. They will begin with strategies for success with Heather McNeese, so that encompasses sort of career exploration along with what it takes to be part of an interview, what it takes to find your interests, you know, discover things about yourself so that you will follow a path of your own success, and you'll find joy in your work later on in your career. So, you know, ideally, we were thinking we would start right with 6th grade. We piloted that this year, and it could be, it could be the interruption that COVID kind of delayed that kind of, you know, the social emotional skills to begin at a young age, but we're on track to go forward next year. There's going to be a flow because again, we're student request scheduled, so kids can enter the pathway and then say, "No, this isn't for me," and kind of step out or change gears, you know. So it's sort of evolving. Next week's a big document turned into the state again, and to see how we proceed. But the plans right now is a business and health pathways secured next year, and then growing from there to include even some of the locations.
And I think yeah, more broadly, like pathways represent a shift in the way we think about preparing kids at the high school level. So historically, it was more of a liberal arts curriculum. It took a little bit of all these things, right? There still, as it exists, a number of necessary requirements to meet DESE or any state's requirements. But those things will still kind of be there, unless, you know, this changes, which it very well might, but the idea now is to really create these pre-professional, you know, pathways that kids can go into that are more tightly aligned to either, you know, entry into the workforce or entry into a college career to continue that line of study. So it's allowing kids to, like, for lack of a better term right now, kind of more tailor their electives, you know, to kind of fit that. But you know, again, like large comprehensive high schools, you know, might have multiple pathway programs that are going on. And so, you know, these kids are able to really, you know, dive deep into an area of intense focus or interest and be able to follow that all the way through without having to take a whole lot of things that they're really not into or aren't going to serve them. So it's an evolving way that we're thinking about high schools across America right now. But in terms of what you actually could take off the plate, at this point, there's not a whole lot because we still have to, you know, satisfy the requirements for graduation, but.
And it's we're working with a strong partnership of the workforce office out of Pittsfield. So when they're side by side with us, they're thinking, what do we need here in Berkshire County? They're not planning to see, you know, oh, there's this great job in Springfield and kids would have to, so we're looking for businesses here in Berkshire County where our kids can take a course of study and then maybe be interning or have an externship out at a local business.
And is that something they can or will be able to get LMHS credit for?
Yes, yes.
And can I just interject, because I think this is a really wonderful evolution, because my experience in the past where there were students, and again, this goes, I don't much time about the equity issue of students who have family support around an internship after school, or a student who, I know of a student in one of my children's class who went and got her CNA, so she was already working as a nurse part-time, or some of the kids, you know, who do firefighting, you know. So some families can support through their networks, oh, we're gonna do an internship. Some of the students in the high school leave school at noon or 11 o'clock and to go do their internship. And that's great, but the reality again is some just don't even know that's a possibility. So when you include it as part of the overall education, what I really think is it gives students a way to think about lots of different opportunities, some of whom will have that internship opportunity to leave school after, you know, when they're a senior and do work, some of whom will be continuing their education with a medicine, engineering, whatever coursework, maybe at BCC, like, so it sounds like you're looking at the range of options, but again, presenting it for all students and not those who, you know, again, personal experiences is went and got, you know, school credit for firefighting and EMT for kids, but sometimes that takes parental, but now you're making it as part of what we talk about for everybody, and I think that is a really wonderful opportunity to really just think about it in a broad term for all students and not just those who can kind of, because we've been doing it for a long time, but in a very informal, kind of unfunded way. And I think the work that they're doing is pretty amazing with also looking at the future careers and what are we really looking for.
All right, we'll move into the social studies department.
Thank you, George.
No problem.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Kelly Klein Beauty. I'm representing the Social Studies Department. I'll be brief because Ben, I'm pretty much repeating a lot of what Ben said earlier. Our biggest increase is in field trips and guest speakers. And when you really think of humanities and history working in conjunction with English, this is the way we make our curriculum come alive, right? We bring them to sites to see the arts, the theaters, the museums. And I hear Ronnie's voice all the time about inclusion, equity, diversity, and this is what brings it to life. And we need it funded so that we leave no student behind. And we appreciate that support that the school committee has always showed us in the past on that, and hope it can continue. And then along the same lines is we have an increase in textbooks because we are interested in adding some text for summer reading in particular that is more inclusive and showing narratives of those voices that might be lost in history through time. And make those more accessible to all of our students. So along with the traditional writing guides and text replacements. And we also have a civics requirement upon us, right, with the state. So I know that's being done in 8th grade and 10th grade, and they're also looking for text to help support that civics project requirement as well. So those are where all our increases are. If you have any questions.
Is this the Rampola books? in 10th
Yeah,
grade?
those are the writing guides that we give to the students in 10th grade, and they keep them for 10th, 11th, and 12th, and they're their copies. So our hope is that they carry them off to college, and I believe most of our students do. I think the one thing that our humanities department does extremely well is teaching our children to research, read, and write at the college level. They go off and they feel that they have a cutting edge above their peers in schools. It's one of the biggest comments we get back is this is what they know and this is what they know really well when they get there. And I think it's the expertise that we have in the humanities department supporting that, and that writing guide is part of that.
Thank you. Any questions for John? Okay, so move on.
World languages.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anne Marie Rodriguez, and I'm happy to talk to you about the World Languages Department and some of the growth that we've been experiencing. As you know, our focus is to prepare all students for success in a global economy. And so to that end, our department continues to demonstrate growth in many areas. For example, in the middle school, we're building upon our Latin program. And so all students that are coming into the middle school can be exposed to Latin as well as French and Spanish. In addition, in the high school, oh, and by the way, in the middle school, we're trying to do everything that we can to incorporate social emotional learning and everything that we've done in professional development to capitalize on that and bring it to all of our students. At the high school level, we still have a 2-year language requirement, meaning that all students need to have 2 years of the same language to graduate. But we're seeing more and more students that are striving to successfully complete 3 or 4 years of language. They tend to be on the college pathway. And some of them are ambitious and want to double up on languages. So it's not unusual for us to see a high school student continue on this very rigorous pathway and double up on language. But we recognize as a department that traditional, maybe more rigorous college seemingly pathway is not meant for everybody. So we have high school students, for example, that might want to do 2 or only 3 years of language. And for those students, we've added an elective that they can take, and it's called Spanish Culture and Conversation. And I should mention that Annie Fielding stepped in this year to teach that class for us, and she's been met with great success that all of her students now want to take it again next year. So we're currently looking at ways that we can make that happen for students who perhaps don't want a very, very rigorous program, but still one that the College Board recognizes for high school credit. So essentially, we will help all students have the greatest program that they want to have with regard to foreign languages. Talking about growth, continuing our growth, we continue to have success with our instructional and assessment practices, as is evident through the National Spanish exam and the National Latin exam. We have many students over the years. We had to pause this last year, but we have many students over the years who have received gold, silver, bronze, and medals and honorable mention certificates. And that's in response to demonstrating their proficiency in whatever their target language is. And it's nice for them to get some recognition for the success that they have achieved. I think it's important that with regard to assessment, I mentioned that we are evaluating right now other assessment protocol tools. For a couple of reasons, we feel that there's newer programs out there that are actually providing us with more usable data. And by that, I mean data that looks at all of the language domains that helps us to reflect upon and improve our assessment practices. So it's really important to us that we maintain currency in that area. So some of the professional development that you're seeing in the budget is in response to our need to maintain currency and then inform our practices for all students. Part of the reason for that, I don't know if you've heard of the seal of biliteracy in the state of Massachusetts, but this is I'm thinking there's 34 states in the nation right now. Massachusetts recently jumped on that path and is one of the states that allows public school districts to affix a seal of biliteracy on a student's high school diploma. The seal represents a student's proficiency in language, in a second language, in addition to English. So they have to attain a certain level of proficiency in all of the language domains in both English and whatever the target language is. I actually have a meeting with the Department of Ed online this Thursday to get more information about that. The reason why the assessment is so important is there's only certain protocols that the Department of Ed will allow us to use and recognize students for that. So I'm proud of our program. I'm proud of the colleagues that I have that are constantly trying to improve practice and assessment philosophies. And if Mr. Tate can get that 9-foot rainbow, we have an international camp happening on March 23rd. I will be sending out letters and inviting all of you to attend. But we're really excited to bring that back. We haven't done that in a few years. We've had to pause it. It's typically, you may see in the budget, it's typically an every other year event. We haven't done it in a couple of years. So I think with that, I will be here to answer whatever questions you have.
I have a couple questions, but you saved me one because I was gonna ask you if the fair was coming back. Really is wonderful. And is that typically for the 8th grade or is it the whole?
The entire
school?
school, we invite Morris, we invite the community. As you know, we transform the, I appreciate the custodial staff tremendously because in a couple of hours between school closure at 2:30 and 4:30 in the afternoon, we transform the theater, cafeteria, and Duffin lobby into an exhibit hall. We have performances by students and exhibits of several countries being represented by children, families, faculty, anyone who wants to be a part of it, we include.
Has the Lenox public community typically been invited to that? Okay, because I think again, it's more from the years I remember it to be much bigger, which is great. So I think it's another example of community relations and making sure that people are aware in the general public of that's an opportunity to engage, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah,
I have a specific question about your presentation here, where it says developing a more equitable program among the 3 languages. So what do you mean by that?
Right. So right now, all of our students who come into 6th grade are offered the opportunity to take French and then Spanish. But we have a French, Spanish, and Latin program, and we're trying to have that available to all students. That does present some scheduling difficulties, but we've been working together, Principal Canago and my department and guidance, and we've been having some conversations how to make that happen. We have a couple of models that we think will work. So we're hoping that can take place in September.
And I have a question about the last presentation you talked about the seal of biliteracy. So this is really a question of me just not knowing. So we have English language learners, and we work really hard to help them with academic English when their primary language is not English. So would students in that situation be eligible for that certificate or seal of biliteracy as they gain more English academic proficiency?
Yes, and thank you for asking that question because it, so our English language learners are trying to develop proficiency in English.
Right.
As a Spanish teacher, excuse me, I'm trying to develop proficiency in my students in Spanish. right? So if a student speaks Turkish at home and then is learning English, then they're becoming bilingual
Right.
in both languages. And so that's the reason why we're looking at all of these different assessment protocols, because that would give us the ability to give an English language learner who has mastered listening, reading, speaking, and writing in a Russian language or an Asian language, something that I could not personally assess, but I can assess their English. And so, yes, to answer your question, it's a great, it seems great. I don't know everything there is to know about it. I have some emails going back and forth, and I'm very excited to make that happen for our students. In alignment with some of the conversations that have been taking place, if you don't mind me taking another 2 minutes of time. This is a first step to perhaps having a global citizenship program at some point, where we recognize students not only for their biliteracy or more than that, triliteracy, but also civic responsibility, volunteer, international travel. Which is another thing I should have mentioned. We've had to pause our field trips and international travel, but we're really looking forward to bringing all of that back. Our students are asking. We of course recognize all the reasons for why we've had to pause that, but appreciate support in having conversations moving forward. It's really important to us that we're providing our students with immersive cultural and linguistic opportunities. So, and all of that contributes to the skill evaluation.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick question. Sure. I guess the equitable balance thing, I've been curious in a different way. How many of our students end up pursuing Spanish versus French versus Latin?
Like, can you
Just
help me with that?
roughly, not.
Fine.
I want to say that, I mean, Latin's numbers are lower, and generally we moved it back down to start a 7th grade cohort in order to build those numbers back up. So we see an increase when we reach down to the middle school. The idea of bringing it back to the 6th grade really came too late last spring, and we're ahead of the game to make something really work and balance it out. Numbers wise, I mean, out of the numbers that are in the book, I would say, probably 2/3 are in French and Spanish, and 1/3.
I was about to say that.
Well, that would be too equitable.
That'd be a good-
So, remarkably,
No, I
I'm
think-
sitting next to the math department chair. More like 3/4 are in Spanish, and like Latin tended to be that second language. So if they were already 2 years in to Spanish, they might take Latin 1. And they know why, because Latin is sort of the pre-med school language. They see that the benefit of vocabulary in college comes from their study of Latin at the high school level.
Well, and we also see that students who are going into the humanities and of course any of the medical fields, that Latin is a great course that they should have in their program. So I think it's important to remember that pre-COVID, our Latin numbers were higher. All of our language numbers were higher. And so we're trying to bring language back to the middle school at a
Not
at a
to,
very equitable
yeah,
level so that we move forward with that.
not have more time to this, but the performance classes tend to drop in enrollment due to the pause because of COVID. So woodshop, art, language, world language, music, they all can tell you that numbers kind of dropped because it was hard to do that in a 2-dimensional world. But we expect it to come back.
We have to give Anne Marie a shout out too, because she does offer Shelton English immersion training for our teachers. So all teachers in Mass are required to become trained in sheltered English immersion and re-up that every so many years. So she offers that in-house for our folks, which is amazing. And it helps teach students who are emerging bilinguals for who English is not their first language. But what I found through going through that myself is that it helps you become a better teacher of language in general. So even for English speakers learning English, it helps. And for all students and all teachers to teach students how to gain academic language, right? And so I think that, domain-specific vocabulary is greatly enhanced by going to that training as well. So again, thanks for offering that.
Thank you.
I just had a question relative to the language lab. What, can you talk a little bit about how widely used that is?
So I believe our program has 50 licenses. And we may not start out a year with all 50 of those licenses being used, but by the end of the year, we're pretty close to that. Occasionally, we have a few licenses that are available and we'll offer them to colleagues if they want to learn a language for a couple of months because we paid for those those extra months. The language lab is often used for students who perhaps want to learn an Asian language or German and we don't teach German or some non-house language, something that we don't teach. And it also just provides support to students that need that.
And is that when a student goes into, for example, learn German, are they able to get any credit for that, or is that just really an interest at, an application?
Yeah, it's more an application, it's elective credit. They can do it for 1 day a week or 4 days a week, is that right?
Yes, so 1 day a week is 1 credit, up to 4 days a week would be 4 credits.
Yeah.
And they might do it for 1 semester or the whole year.
And it's not included for the graduation.
Right, that's a two semester. And colleges don't consider it part of the high school requirement.
Thank you. Any other questions for Emily?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move into library.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Alexis Kennedy. Hello. Alexis Kennedy, librarian at Lenox. I love this evening because it allows us to kind of pause and reflect upon kind of where we were last year and where we are this year. And certainly, I think I've never experienced, I don't think anyone in this room has experienced such change as we have recently. I think from a library perspective, you'll remember that last year the library program was closed really for all intents and purposes. Melissa Taylor and I were assigned, we worked with Mike Jackson and Tim Lufkin in the tech department, and the library really wasn't a space for students. Students certainly didn't use physically in the way that they typically would. We did a lot of pushing content into Canvas and things like that. It was really we were sort of in a brand new world, and we're back into a transitional phase now. But what's really exciting is that, so last week, the end of last week was Thursday, through the American Studies course, which is a junior course that is taught by Megan Porter in history and Lisa Westpizer in English. Students did presentations, and they had done the research project was artists as change makers. They had to choose a historic artist and a current artist, and I came to the library and presented. And I, of course, have the good fortune of getting to kind of have my fingers in all of this. And one of our students brought his trumpet, and he did a presentation on Dizzy Gillespie and James Morrison. And he started by pulling out his trumpet, and he played for us, and he talked about it. And it was just such an amazing experience to kind of watch and be a part of. So that happened last week. This morning, Dr. Anne Marie and I started our day, before 8 o'clock. I was able to work with Lisa Westpizer again in English, her 6th grade. She's teaching a unit, she's teaching a course of 6th grade. She's doing 6th grade reading this year for the first time. And Dr. Rodriguez's high school, I think it was Spanish 3 students came. And it was the second time we were able to do this year, but the high school students sat with the 6th graders and they read to them stories in Spanish. And it was just such a beautiful, I love when these sort of pieces happen in the library. The sort of informal mentorship, they're chatting, they're kids that wouldn't normally be brought together, they're different ages. It's something that's very unique to Lenox, I think, in many ways. Looking forward now to things that I'm very excited about. Amy Higgins, our phenomenal new guidance counselor, I think this is her 2nd year. She has just been such an incredible positive sort of person to the school. she reached out to me a couple weeks ago and said, Bentley, the puppy, how'd you feel about having him in the library one day a week? And so I'm so excited. So this I'm really excited to, again, the seeds had been sown several years before COVID, but I had, the library had been awarded a LEAF grant for a pollinator garden in our reading park. There's sort of space right outside of the physical library, kind of looking out the soccer fields. And it's really exciting to be working with some educators at Berkshire Botanical Garden. They'll be coming in the spring. In the last 6 weeks of the school year, they'll be working with our middle school students who will sort of sign up on a voluntary, sort of if they're interested, they'll work with the educators. I'll partner with the 6th grade team. Potentially we'll get some science teacher, Mr. Sanders in science will hopefully kind of work with us. But I'm really excited. They'll sort of design, they'll do a lot of educational, what am I trying to say? There'll be some lessons about pollinator gardens. They'll design them and they'll actually install them in the library itself. So I'm really excited to be able to have such great community partners and to kind of feel like we're finally kind of finding our stride again after the pandemic.
So just math question. Pollinator garden?
Pollinator garden.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
I
One
was
must
just like-
enunciate so well.
No, it's hard. It's the
Yeah.
math, because pollinator is.
Yeah.
So it will be right outside the library.
Yeah, so if, I don't know if you've ever been back there, but there's some benches. And there's a fence that a class several years ago had installed to kind of separate it from the PE area. It'll be a pollinator garden. Yeah, that's very awesome.
And you saved me my other question, which was what collaboration, if any, is happening with the Lenox Library? So. Thank you.
Yes. Anything else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The last one, yeah. I'm locked out as well. I came down to millionaire.
Well, we have guidance and career education. Mr. Hofer.
All right, so we can move into guidance.
Hello, everyone. Dave Hilfiger, I'm the.
Hang on while I shut this down.
Okay. It's like Star Wars.
Mr. Hilfinger, I'm actually a robot.
Sorry. Now, yeah, in regard to budgetary matters, see the increase in budget this upcoming year, primarily because of the new data manager position. Speak on, so where that kind of increased the housing of data management for the district and guidance with Beth O'Brien. In addition to that, there's a reduction in professional development because as other departments have mentioned, a lot of things are offered online now, which reduces costs, things related to cost of travel, food, etc. But yeah, in guidance, we're just excited to have this year to adjust and help everyone else adjust to this new normal and not go back to a year with multiple schedule changes. A lot of applications asked for everyone, including parents. But this has been, it has had inherent challenges. A lot of staff members, students, and parents have needed additional support navigating this year. Challenges that we faced in this COVID world, and my guidance that we have to address that. It's helped, working collaborating with the different departments, with mental health, offering mental health services, working with the student adjustment counselor in Higgins. Every morning I do the mindful minute every morning, which is deep breathing, just to focus on mindfulness, being present. The addition of Bentley has helped bring students into school. I've heard stories of students that were thinking about not coming, but that look forward to seeing the dog. Coming for that reason. I have students now on Tuesdays, Bentley is in guidance, and today I had multiple students come up to me and say, can you make sure I come in tomorrow so I can do Bentley? So it's meeting the logistical needs, including scheduling right now, and then looking into changing over to Power School, thinking about that logistically, but also meeting the day out needs of the students and staff and the parents. And it's helped to collaborate with all departments working together. It's I think a very tight-knit community where we all work as a village to support one another. So, do you have any questions?
I think it's important to underscore that while COVID has certainly presented mental health challenges, that there were also challenges before COVID, right? And so I think it's easily lost in the conversation. But prior to COVID, in another job, I spent a lot of time trying to secure mental health services for students who are struggling. So the mental health crisis maybe has been exacerbated by COVID, but it certainly wasn't caused by it. And so I think it's just important to remember that our guidance department is still working on trying to address some of the pre-COVID stuff in addition to all the new stuff because of COVID as well. So and again, thank you for the work you guys do over there. We're still looking to hire a school adjustment counselor, proving more difficult than we thought, but we're hopeful that we can move forward and secure that.
Any other questions?
Can I just underscore with you, Mark, for just 1 second about that? But I think the other part that we don't always agree, like there's COVID, right? But then there's the systems that within which we live of how we fund healthcare, and that there are many providers of mental health care services who have stopped taking certain kinds of insurance and have stopped being available and have had to do their own self-care. So just this, I know we're in a budget meeting, but it's talking about the fact that we used to, I think, make the assumption that if families wanted mental health counseling or working through a crisis, that they had access to services. And every indicator I can see, the wait lists are 10, 12, 18 weeks. And especially when we talk about children who are in mental health crises and worried about assessing danger and harm, in addition to also just function, anxiety, like the concept of the kids coming in the door, that level of how do they function, anxiety is, the ways in which we use ourselves as advocates within our community, and the fact that we don't have services available to families outside of our schools. So like everything, what happens? It gets put into the school to solve all the social problems. And so when people outside of this look at our budgets and think, oh, you're doing more, you're spending too much, well, because if we don't do it, literally, there are people that fall between the cracks and there are children that suffer. And so I appreciate the way that you're all being creative and you're being creative about how do we bring that in-house. But when we're looked at as a bloated budget by some people that don't get it, I want to say that I think there are many things that we're doing in our schools because there literally isn't anywhere else that could do it, even in a community that's otherwise considered affluent. And so I think that's just an important thing that we have to think about, that people say, oh, the schools are doing too much. Well, because ultimately we're not gonna, and I appreciate all of you because you look at ways in which the kids are not falling through the cracks as much as possible. And I appreciate that.
many of these needs, no income boundaries, right? Like, these are things that are cross-cutting, so. All right, we'll move over into the athletics budget with Mr. Pugh.
Hello again. So, yeah, I mean, just to reflect a little bit, to stay within a short amount of time, I mean, we've certainly come a long way in the last year and a half. We didn't have sports for quite a while until about mid-February last year when we decided to have a 3-week basketball season. Basketball's in full swing right now, and Mr. Knievel and Mr. Betty were with me Saturday night, and we had a full house against Lee, a military appreciation night, and it really, I would say Saturday was, outside of maybe some soccer games, Saturday night felt like it was the first time we were back to normal in the long, since probably being at the Western Mass Championship, Mr. Knievel, just as COVID was beginning a couple of years ago. So we've kind of come to a point where things are kind of getting back to normal, and except we're all wearing masks inside. But everything else, I would say just student athletes, pretty high regard to the COVID precautions and standards we've been enforcing. There's been a lot of follow through with our students. I think our students comparably to other districts around the state, even within our county, I think our Lenox students have done an incredible job, and their coaches, as far as keeping everybody safe and following through with protocols. That really has to be pointed out. Also, our coaches being willing to coach. There wasn't a single coach that was able to return that didn't return. They all returned and were willing to wait patiently until the season began, as long as it could be. It's an interesting stat that Mike put up there earlier. 4% of our budget is for athletics, but when I look at our student body, 7 through 12, just in the last 9 months, 38% of spring, 38% of 7 through 12 graders were involved in athletic sport. 46% in the fall, with COVID going on, almost half of our students were in athletics in the fall within our sports. And this winter, we've had about 100 students, a little bit less because of a lot of the sports are outside in the cold. Basketball teams are small. About 27% of the students are involved in athletics right now. And in the spring, I'm looking at probably close to half or 50% of the students in the school being involved in athletics. And I always say the athletic part of the day starts at 2:30. There's a lot of nights I go home at 9. That's another 6.5 hours on top of a regular school day. In a sense, a lot of our kids and coaches are actually doing 2 school days a lot. So those students are doing a lot within their week. But it's a really important part of their day. It really creates a lot of connectedness within our student body and our coaches. Students are really connected to school. I think over the years, couple of years, working with the admin team, we've really tightened the grip on getting kids into school on time so they're eligible for athletics and following through with those rules and such, just to put academics first in their day and then have them be there ready for their sports teams. There's been some bumps in the road, joining new leagues and such. Know that I'm working very long days to try to make it so our students are not out so late with our new leagues during the week. They try to push games later in the week. It's a very complicated mess out there. A lot of teams have gone to MIA rankings and such. If we want to be one of those top teams, if we want to go to MIA tournament, we do need to be a part of these leagues. We do need to play a competitive schedule. It is going to require more transportation costs. I'm doing everything I can to try to balance everything. Rest assured. As Melissa Mike pointed out, we are saving about $11,000. I did sit down, looked at the entire year next year, all the teams we have to play in our leagues, calculate the miles for every single team, and it was a lot. And I got it pretty darn close outside of tournament miles, which we don't know if we're going to be heading to the Cape or Nantucket like mine did. I would say that volleyball, for instance, I spent probably I don't know, 9 hours on a bus between Monday and Thursday of that week with our girls traveling to the other side of the state. But again, I think holistically, when I look at our program, I heard it a lot the other night. Man, you guys are really doing a good job. You're really following through with protocols. Your coaches are doing a phenomenal job. The fans are behaving themselves. I'm telling you, it's been very, very rewarding as your athletic director. Cost, supplies, we do need some new soccer goals. We have a soccer goal on the north end of the campus that is literally falling apart. It's not safe. And we would really like to put some goals in the upper field so that we're not wearing our JV and varsity fields during the course of the season. We do need to increase our PD. There's a lot of students that need to get up to date with their certifications. With COVID, it really made things difficult. And of course, we added lacrosse. I just made my recommendation for appointing our lacrosse coach. And of course, with lacrosse, we're looking at balls. His response to me back today was, I need lots of them. I'm like, I need a quantity, right? So that's a cost, you know, we're gonna absorb a lot of the equipment from Lee, uniforms, helmets, etc. But that will be an added cost, but as Mark Goslin, he wasn't, Dr. Goslin wasn't here that long, and we agreed, this is very much a soccer and lacrosse community, just by its makeup and its size and everything else. So I think lacrosse is gonna be a big sport here. Know that we're still co-opting lacrosse with Lee, Mount Everett, and Monument. So we're looking at a pretty solid varsity team. If needed, we may look at a JV team this spring, but I think more than likely it's just gonna be one varsity team with one head coach with a few volunteers. Let's see, anything. No, I think I covered things. Like I said, I'm working. I just talked with a colleague today. She's very concerned about her daughter. She's coming up to middle school. She's very worried about the late nights, you know. Just so you know, the league, the way they set up, when we absorbed ourselves into the Pioneer Valleys, you take a league that had 8 teams, for instance, or 6 teams. They didn't put all the Berkshire County teams in one league, of course. What they did is they basically, based on our strength of teams, they put us basically 2 pair into each league. So if you have a team, a league of 8 teams, 6 are down in Pioneer Valley, 2 in Berkshire County. What I've done to offset that is all my independent games I played in Berkshire County. So we end up playing 6 away games in the course of the season at like Mahar, Frontier, Palmer, where the girls are tonight. And what I'm trying to do with those games is, as much as I can, push them towards the end of the week so that our kids can play later in the week. But as I told the colleague today, look, I can't expect ADs to accept us playing there on a Friday night, but expect them to play at our house on a Tuesday night, because we can't play everything on a Friday and Saturday. So they understood, like, right, it's nice to go play them on a weekend, but you know, I can't speak out of both sides of my mouth and say, can you come play us during the week? So it's very complicated. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but trust, very much it's on my mind, seeking equity, seeking balance in our kids' lives, but at the same time, maintaining a very competitive, high-level athletic community.
And just so you know, the process of, like, Dave, I don't want you to get the wrong idea that we're absorbed into, or we wanted to join Pioneer. They had both districts vote, and they outnumbered us in the Berkshires. You know, we are our own district before our own sport league in Berkshire County. And they asked the principals and the ADs to vote. We were just sheer outnumbered. I don't think anyone up here voted to say, except for maybe some of the football schools, they knew it would help them. And as we think about the travel, we also have to think about the kids. We have a number of very strong athletes that make them stand out to some really quality schools. And if you think about some of our graduates, you know, from even in the past 10 years since I've been here, the number of students that went on to play Division I was large. Got to give a plug to Guidance for making that happen, because that application process is completely different from a normal college application.
And a big piece of Berkshire County AD that we agree, and I've said this before on the meetings, but I'll say it again, is, you know, within the Berkshire County, within the athletic teams, there's huge differences in ability. Our softball team, as hard as they try, it's hard to go up against a Taconic, a PHS, a Wacono, who's it. Within Berkshire County, it's tough, right? So that's why our softball numbers are as small as they are. Do you run on the track team or do you play on a softball team and get beat 20-2 every single night? So this season, I was just telling athletes, hey, this is gonna be the first season in a long, long time where our softball team can go into every single night, whether they drive 45 minutes or are at home, and they're gonna feel like they can win the game. That goes a long way as an athlete when you feel like you can win a game and you're in a competitive league and you're making movement towards being able to be in the tournament. Whereas, so that's a big reason, the Berkshire ADs, we needed to join the PBIC. We were looking for our independent games. The PBIC would not play us in independent games. We would end up with 12 game schedules, they were playing 18, and we would end up playing each other 4 times to make our schedules. So that was a big reason why we joined the PBIC. And I think over time there'll be a better balance in the leagues. I was just gonna, just for kids, take a look at the Mahar AD and look at his basketball transportation costs versus mine. And I bet you ours are at least 3 times what his is, because he's come to Berkshire County twice. I'm heading down there at least 6 times. And within our league, all the schools from Mahar are probably within a half hour. So I'm gonna be looking, Berkshire ADs are gonna be pushing for better equity in our league. So there's, so it's better for our kids.
Do our skiers go up to Berkshire East in the PB?
Alpine or Nordic?
Alpine?
Alpine will be, so Alpine right now is strictly a Berkshire County league. Tennis, for instance, Berkshire County, golf, Berkshire County. There's a number of leagues that are still Berkshire County. And then we'll compete in the state championships in the districts and against the Pioneer Valley teams and others. Nordic, the state race is Tuesday, probably most likely a prospect. And again, as Mike said, we have athletes that compete at a very high level. They go to Olympic trials, and it's a big piece of their resume to college. It really is. It really gets them in the door. And that's, I think, one of the benefits of the new process, the MIA. It gives the students, at least here in Berkshire County, it's generally a forgotten county. It gives them a lot more. They're much more visible to college scouts and everything else, because they're playing teams that are being covered by Mass Live or Springfield Republic. You know, they're on the news. They're athletes of the week. So I think for the athletes, it's much more. I think in that way it's better for them.
I just had a question about the professional development.
Yes.
So that had gone up dramatically, and you said that was for the coaches. It says dues, but I don't know if it's.
Yes, so there's 2 pieces within my budget. The $700 for the coaches courses, but the dues for within the PD, they did go up. You know, joining the PBIC, their dues were higher. The MIA dues were higher, and Berkshire County for a little while we had a 0 balance. We had credits because of the lost seasons during COVID, but now this year we have kind of a truer dues amount because of all the sports running. So that's compared to last year, that's why the number is significantly higher.
Okay.
Last year, we basically had a 3-week winter season followed by.
Well, even the 5-year average was like $250, and it's 3,800. So that's why I was wondering.
Did you put the amount somewhere else, Melissa?
No, I think what that is you're seeing the Maya dues in there, and they were not in there before they were in administration.
Okay. Okay.
That's
yeah. I was just trying to figure out like why would that have gone so much?
But just in a bigger picture too, it's important. Veronica, you very speak. We have one of the same mind as far as equity. I will say, looking in the future, long range, as far as equity and athletics, is just the whole idea of having everything on campus. You know, our athletics are spread. You know, there's if you're a soccer player, it's on campus. If you're a volleyball player, you're on campus. If you're a basketball player, you're on campus. If you're a cross country runner, you're on campus. Everything else is off campus.
We're putting the golf course, Steve.
Yeah. Except for golf. But we can't have a mountain on our course like Alpine. But I mean, there's just you know, alignment with the campus, everything there. There's just a lot more ability. I went first as it means something because I was living in small town Blair, I went to Gateway. And I didn't play basketball. Why? Because my parents didn't give me a ride, right? I didn't play a football because my school didn't have a football team. We go out the league. So I very much agree with you, just creating as much equity as we can to our athletes, because for a lot of our athletes, they do have to practice off campus, whether it's tennis, baseball, softball. cross-country skiing. There's a lot of moving parts at the end of the day. And that always is a big part of my thought and reasoning, Veronica, is how can we build better equity amongst the athletic program so that any kid who wants to be a skier can be a skier, and et cetera, et cetera. So,
Okay,
thank you.
any other questions?
I'm sorry.
All right. Student activities, is it?
Yeah. Maybe we'll look into the health services.
Yeah. We'll go to you, Jen.
I'm Jen Reese, I'm the nurse at the middle and high school. I mean, it looks like a significant increase in the budget, for the most part. The professional development, adding that in, really hoping to get to a couple of school nurse conferences this year. Hopefully, will be live this summer. That would be wonderful to actually be able to be collegiate with school nurses. Kind of debrief the last couple of years and refocus on where school nursing is going in the future. Supplies are down a little bit. Obviously, with all of the COVID money that we've had access to the last couple of years and being able to have, all the extra PPE, having the kids be remote, we didn't go through as many Band-Aids and ice packs and those sorts of things. So I am able to use those supplies, as Mike said, with what we have in the health office for storage. One of the things that we did change this year, thanks to technology, is we moved the health database to an online, more secure backup system rather than our in-house servers, which has given us the ability, just school nurses, the ability to access the program a little bit easier from wherever we are, to be able to answer questions for parents, even if we're not in the health office. And we've also been able to open up our licenses rather than just having 2 or 3 licenses. We're now up to 4 licenses, which with COVID and all of the testing that we're doing, especially this year, it gives us the ability to have a substitute nurse come in and help us on those really crazy busy days and be able to document on 4 licenses versus having 1 nurse doing all the documentation, even when we have extra help in the office. Again, something that's been brought up a number of times, the health and wellness and mental health of our students. Dealing with anxiety, depression, all of those things. As Dr. Gosling had said, that was something that, looking back at the previous budgets, that's a short-term goal and a long-term goal that has been in my budget, I think since I've been here for the last 5 years. Definitely continued to see trends where, kids are just stressed as, society is stressed. And how kids deal with that at a young age is sometimes not always the healthiest way. So having those supports in school, as Ms. Fenton had said, is an area, especially in Berkshire County, where we don't have a lot of those supports. The school really kind of picks up the ball and helps those families and helps those kids to keep them safe and get them the support that they need. So definitely having that second school adjustment counselor and having, everybody really being on board to really be focused on our kids' mental health and the anxiety that COVID has just manifested even more. So having those supports has been really important. And I appreciate all the support for the health office over the last couple of years. I know nobody expected the pandemic, but I can't imagine going through this without the support of the school committee and my colleagues. So thank you. And I'll answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Jen?
All right, so that's the end of the high school department presentations. And then we have technology left. I don't know if I want to dismiss the high school teachers.
I was going to say, first of all, I want to thank, it's a remarkable group of educators, counselors, nurses, and thank you for spending your evening with us. I know some of you have an hour or so, 45-minute ride to Williamstown or wherever.
And early morning classes.
And early morning classes, so we want you in school tomorrow.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Good to see you all.
And then we get, Randy can have the center stage.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm sorry for the confusion, but as soon as you wrote that, I went, oh, my God. She must have been there. When I approved it, so.
They support your end of going.
They support You don't mess with the SQ.
That's right.
Your words, your actions say otherwise.
Why don't you close the door, Fred? And we can. Who's ready?
Fred, is Randy out there?
What?
Is Randy out there?
Yeah, he's after.
Yeah.
If you like it, will be good.
You need Randy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's his program next. See the last budget with the technology.
Well, wait, guys, I just had, because we didn't really have an instructional services section, I think, I was curious. What sort of DEI assemblies would consist of?
So really guest speakers, activities, field trips.
I mean, like, what's the content that we're trying to impart to the students?
Well, with the COVID protocol, we haven't had really a full school assembly in 2 years. We usually kick off the school year with a guest speaker to kind of theme the year. Something that Brent and I would talk about now to book for next fall. And we usually try to bring in someone who can speak to the students, then stay after and speak to the faculty at a faculty meeting, and then hang around and be available for a parent to.
Okay, Mr. McLeod, thank you for waiting through the last 2 hours of your colleagues' presentations.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm Randy McLeod. I'm the district technology leader here, and thank you for inviting me to this. This is the first time that I've had to do one of these in a long time, so let's get started. So the three major information technology functions that we do, number one is governance. It basically refers to the implementation of operational parameters for working units and individuals' use of IT systems, architecture, and networks. We help to create the rules about how students and staff can use school technology and what they can use it for. This is part of the conventional IT security as well as data assurance, for which IT department is also responsible. We also have infrastructure. So this refers to the hardware components, the network, the circuitry, and all other equipment necessary to make the IT system function according to the established needs of the Lenox Public Schools. And functionality. This one's perhaps the biggest task that we have to do. It refers to creating and maintaining operational applications, developing, securing, storing data that belongs to the Lenox Public Schools, and assisting in the use of software and data management to all functional areas of the school system. That's what we do in a nutshell. Next slide, Mark. So I do want to go over kind of like what we've done so far in 2021 since I took over for the department. One of the big things we did was migrate our Exchange email system over to Gmail. TipWeb IT, this is our new asset management system to track technology equipment. When I first started here, there was no tracking of technology equipment. I believe it was done through old spreadsheets and things like that. So now we have a more efficient way of tracking the technology that we use in the school system. Filewave is our new device management system to keep systems updated, monitored, and tracked. So for instance, if somebody calls and they have a problem with their laptop, we can go in remotely and help them out. But it also keeps the systems updated for any kind of security risk that might be on there, automatic updates for all that stuff. Filewave again for MDM, which is called our mobile device management system. And what that does is it allows us to control iPads and to control Macs. One of the nice things about this is if you have an iPad and you lose it, you can call us and say, hey, I lost my iPad, and we can lock it. And so no one can ever use that device again. So it basically bricks the unit. So that's a great thing to have. We also rolled out a one-to-one Chromebook initiative for all students. So in the elementary school, all of the Chromebooks stay on site. They are in carts, but every room has enough devices for every single kid. And they're all assigned a device. And the big thing for me when I came here was, okay, what happens if COVID happens again and we have to go back remote? I wanted to make sure that everything was set in place so students would be able to have devices, to be able to go home with those and not have to rush, from what I've heard the last time, that they had to really go out, purchase this equipment right away, and then hand deliver a lot of the Chromebooks to students. So that was a big thing of mine. We also assigned new Chromebooks to 6th grade, 7th grade, and 9th grade students. The 6th and the 7th grade was completely paid for by the ECF, which is the Emergency Connectivity Fund. It's like E-rate, it's a part of E-rate, but that enabled us up to $400 per device for free. So we've got about 250 devices in-house, all for free. We didn't pay for any of that. We also got 9th grade devices as well. 9th grade, we had to get right away, so we did purchase those out of our local budget. And it's looking like the Emergency Connectivity Fund may have another round, which means we have about, I would say, 150 Chromebooks that are end of life next year. And we are hoping that all of those will be paid for as well, as long as that ECF continues. These next years, we're going to be implementing a renewal cycle for 6th and 9th grade students. So next year, from that ECF grant, all the new students that are coming in 6th grade will have Chromebooks available for them. They're waiting for them. And then the 9th graders will also be receiving new Chromebooks. In the past, Chromebooks we were told that they would never be end of life. This is like back in 2012. So we're like, okay, well, Chromebooks will last forever. Well, Google has changed that. So now it's around a 5-year to 6-year cycle for their end of life devices. So it's not really clear what that means by end of life. Does it mean that you can still use them? Or does that mean that they're not going to support them anymore? So we do have to keep up on that. So that is something that's kind of new moving forward.
My kids killed mine in about 3 years. So.
Well, that's the other piece too, right? You're also going to have that. You're going to have the kids that damage them. You know, in Lenox, we don't have that very often. In my prior district, it happened a lot more than it does here, but you know, they're kids. Those kind of things happen. We also purchased new laptops for teachers. This was partially paid by ECF. Because they only gave you up to $400 per machine, we had to come up with the rest, because if I was to implement a $400 PC, it wouldn't be good, and I don't think that people would actually like it. So number one with those, we had, well, funny story, we actually had to, we went out with the ACF, we went out and got quotes, right? We went out and got quotes for 115 devices, ready to purchase them, and then we find out they're end of life. So as you know, when it comes to technology now, with the chip crisis, things are getting harder and harder and harder to find. So for instance, even a projector now, where we used to pay $450 for a projector, now we're paying $800 per projector, and because of that whole chip shortage thing. So this was a huge thing, but also I wanted to say that it's kind of weird, but the hard drives that came in these machines, they had what's called spinning discs, and they're very old, right? So when I first started to roll these out, I'm like, okay, these are running really slow. And I had no idea why they were running so slow. Was it the extra RAM that I put in? Was this or that? Well, come to find out, and I'm the one that missed it, that they had spinning discs in them. So I couldn't roll these out to teachers with, you know, being so slow. So Central Berkshire donated about 80 SSD hard drives to me. So with what I had left over and what they were able to give me, because they just, with the new high school, had, redone their fleet. So I was able to use all of those hard drives. So I did want to give a shout out to Joe Sturgis, the Central Berkshire Technology Director, who gave me those devices. So thank you for him.
Thank you for us.
Yes, absolutely. Currently in progress, we have our website conversion, which I apologize, but our website is outdated. There's some things on there that shouldn't be on there. And so our focus was to move this over to what's called School Messenger. School Messenger is what also does our messaging system to parents. So the nice thing about tying those two systems together is that you can send out one notification through School Messenger, and it will also update that to the website as well. It will also go to Facebook. It'll also go to all the other platforms that we want, all with one little button. So we're going through that now, and I think Mark and I are going to get together to go over what's currently on the website and try to get that as much information off of there or new as we can. So Mark and I are going to sit together to go over that ASAP to get that updated. Our Get Help ticketing system, there was no ticketing system when I first came here. So everything was done through email. Now, to try to track all of these things through email is very difficult. And we know we all have email and we know what happens to our emails and they kind of get filtered down. Next thing you know, you kind of forget about it. So the biggest thing about having a ticketing system, number one, is that people know that you received it because it gets automatic information back to them. They can also have FAQs that will kind of help them to determine what the issue might be. But it'll also give us reporting. How many times is this Chromebook broke? How many times did this battery go? How many times do we have to do this or that? Because right now, if I don't have the data for you, it's really hard for me to say what I need without having the actual data to supply you with that. So hopefully this system will help us. Our student information system to conversion or to Power School. So we currently use Rediker, and I think Rediker has served the district for many years. I don't even know when it was purchased. I would say 10, 15 years ago, it was
I
probably
use
purchased.
Rediker at Morris, and I've been gone for a long time.
Okay, so.
I think Rediker came in when Dr.
And then it went away.
And then it came back.
Yeah.
So
Oh, when I came back.
one of the biggest things right now is because we have all these other applications, right? And then you had Rediker, and the way that Mike Jackson, the former technology director, had to get Rediker to speak to all of these other applications, he had to write basically applications, or what's called scripts, to get information out of Rediker and then information into these other systems. So when I first got here, Mike showed me one of the scripts that he wrote to have Rediker speak to Canvas. It was about 500 lines of code that he wrote to try to get those two systems to talk to each other. He was brilliant to do that stuff. But the problem is, when you have somebody new come in, there's no way to reverse engineer that and know all of those little things that he did with his coding. And you shouldn't have to do that. The system should talk to all these other systems automatically. So for me, that was one of the biggest things to move forward with Power School. So it's the interoperability between programs like Canvas, eSped, Mosaic, Mandarin, Clever, GitHelp, School Messenger Presence, and ASOP. So if you have Power School, you've got student information in there, and then you have ESOP, somebody else was typing all that information in because now they have it in two different places. Okay, well, what happens when that student demographic changes? Well, now you gotta go and change it in all the other systems as well. So with Power School, it automatically links to all those other applications. So that means our data is gonna be better. Our school messenger information is gonna be better. Everything is going to be up to date immediately.
State reporting.
State reporting is another huge one. The amount of work that Beth O'Brien had to do for state reporting this year was beyond me with all of her stuff. So that to me is the biggest one, but also for teachers, right? We want them to be able to make it really easy for them, for one to be able to grade. And because we have Canvas now, and we're still moving forward with Canvas, Canvas didn't speak back to Rediker, right? Mike didn't stay on long enough to write that script. So what happens is for teachers now, they have to go into Canvas and they put their grades in. Then they have to go over to Rediker and redo some of that same stuff. With PowerSchool and the integration with Canvas, they put a grade in for Canvas and it goes right over to PowerSchool. So that's going to save all of our teachers a lot of steps. This conversion is probably one of the biggest conversions I think that Lennox has probably ever done. And so we're really trying to take it slow. We're doing everything we can to support the staff and to support the teachers. And after we get this implemented, which we're hoping it starts on September 1st, then we also need to do things for the parents and for the students. So what I'm looking to do is maybe have like a day for the parents to come in and to go over all of that stuff so they know that that's changing. Because right now for parents, I feel bad for them. They don't know where to go for stuff. Should I be in Rutgers or should I be in Canvas? And they don't know where to go. So I think this is going to be really, really great for parents to be able to utilize this system and to know immediately when their student maybe didn't go to class today. So with that PowerSchool app, I can look at my phone and I can, oh, wait, Johnny didn't go, he's not in the second period. And they can call the school meeting and say, I dropped him off. Why isn't he there? So that's a huge thing for PowerSchool to be able to help us with. And now we're also rolling out those laptops for staff members. I've got about 5 or 6 staff members that currently have the new devices. Just making sure that they have everything that they need, making sure that they project, making sure that the audio and the sound and all that stuff works before I roll it out on a larger scale. But we are doing that on an as needed basis. When I first got here too, a lot of the teachers, they were just using desktops and that's really, all they were using. So, which is fine, but to me, again, if we had to go to a remote thing again, and they were home possibly, what devices would they use? So with this whole laptop initiative, it was to get their devices in their hands and to be able to simply go to a training with their laptop. Like right now, they really couldn't do that. If Mike had a presentation and he wanted people to bring their laptops with them, some don't have them, some have their own, some don't have anything, or some have really old devices that were purchased however many years ago. So that's just kind of getting that everyone having the same device and making it easy for us to keep track of things. So future technology requests. We're looking to have a new fiber backbone between wiring closets in each school. It's just the wiring that connects all the rooms together, the closets together. The faster that speed is, the faster everything else is. We're looking to add additional wiring to the ceilings for new wireless access points. So currently, some of the access points that we have they're in the wall, and they're not really great when it's like an in the wall thing. They really should be in the ceiling and kind of pointed down. So we're looking to wire all of those to prepare us for the new wireless access points. So a majority of our current access points are end of life and they're no longer supported. This will be partially funded by E-rate. So E-rate's a federally funded initiative to provide schools and libraries discount pricing on network services and equipment. So we are reimbursed 60% on that. So every dollar that we spend, we basically get 60 cents back. So we only have to spend 40 cents on the dollar. However, we're only eligible for $121,000 through 5-year span. And that's just because of our student population. There's this, I think it's $167 per student. So you can spend $121,000 and they're going to reimburse us 60% of that. So we only have to pay 40% of that $121,000. So everything we're looking to do here, we can't obviously do it with E-rate funding because we're going to spend a lot of it right away. The access points, I believe, are coming to about $75,000. And the last piece here is our network managed firewall. It's around like $40,000. So right there, we're at our $121,000 limit. So if there's anything else we want to do, like the network switches or the new networking racks, if we wanted to do that within 5 years, we would have to find a capital budget expense to be able to do that. But The switches are okay right now. We'll be able to get by for the next couple of years. We're okay with the switches. And then the networking racks, I would love to show you guys one of our closets, but
I've been there.
okay, so you know, it's a mess. It needs to be cleaned up, but there's a lot that goes into that because all the wires that are plugged in, they're not labeled. And they're not labeled on the other end. So when someone has a problem, right, they're like, oh, my something's wrong with my PC, it's not working. I'm like, oh, okay, I go into the room and I look at the jack and I don't know what it's plugged into on the other end. So there's just a tremendous amount of work to really just be able to figure out where things go when you have no documentation to tell you where those things are. So again, if I was able to clean those up, it would be great. We'd be able to be more efficient with fixing issues. So our salaries have increased by $8,000. We also utilize Stefan Billups to do some of the projector work and some audio work for us. And he's been fantastic. Like every time that there's been a projector issue, he's been able to go into the room and he's the one that puts it in. We did purchase about 10 new projectors this year, and we've already used every single one of them because number one, a lot of them are about 10 years old. So the question was, well, do you just buy bulbs for those 10-year-old projectors or do you buy a new one? And I went with buying a new one just because it also has the inputs that you need because some of them only have the old VGA connections to them. So with new laptops that are coming, they have a new connection, you know, HDMI or USB-C, and without an adapter, you wouldn't be able to use that projector. So I am hoping to replace more projectors as we move along. But again, 10 of those that I purchased in December or November, we've already used them all. So I feel kind of like right now, when a teacher says, oh, I have a problem with my projector, I'm like, oh, like, you know, how are we gonna replace those? So.
And that design has changed a lot too, so projectors used to be mounted, you know, X amount of feet from the screen, and now there are these short throw projectors much closer, or you have backlit systems like these. You know, someone was mentioning smart boards earlier, so again, we kind of have to think about, you know, what direction we want to go in terms of that instructional technology.
Yeah, and the short throw ones are great. They just, it's the mounting of them that costs the most amount of money. So a lot of people are like, yeah, well, you know, but would you go with TVs? Why wouldn't you go with TVs? Because TVs probably last longer, you know, than a projector and a bulb would be. But in order to get that large screen, you're going to be paying, you know, a lot more money because you want it to be as big as possible. So other costs that we have, software has increased by 32,000. This year, we've already purchased ASOP. Our Sophos antivirus we're looking to purchase. We have an older antivirus now, Kaspersky. This one's much better, much more security. I'm also looking to replace our internet filter. And right now we have an internet filter that kind of is just doing internet filtering, making sure that the kids don't go on, you know, certain sites and things like that. But there are updated internet filters now that can give you automatic reporting. So for instance, a child goes on to a site about guns. It will automatically trigger that student went on a site looking for guns and send that to certain people. And you can also do that to parents as well. So parents have the ability, once we implement this system, if they want to get a report generated of all the websites that they went to through a 2-week period or a month period, or however often that they'd like to see that information. We implemented this at our previous district, and it was great because there was a student that was actually looking to build a bomb. And we were alerted on that immediately. The police went to the house. I don't know what happened after that, but let's just say that those kind of systems are what's going to protect our children, you know, moving forward for this district. So that to me is a large one. And it also gives teachers the ability to unblock websites right at that particular time. So they don't have to call me and say, hey, can you unblock this? I just want my kids to go to this website. For that hour period of time, they can click a button And their class will be able to use that website for that particular moment in time, and they don't have to ask me to unlock it. So it kind of puts that into the teacher's hands to say that, well, I think this, and then in the future, maybe you should be unlocked. But for just for that time period, we're giving them that ability to do that. So that's why that one needs to be upgraded. Our help desk system, Power School, which was actually a decrease. So Power School is around $8,500, $9,000, while Rediker was $14,000. So going to this was actually a cost savings in the long run. And then Filewave. And right now, Zoom, we had to include that in our operating budget, it's just $11,000 for Zoom a year. Because we took it out of ESSER funds in previous years. So if we want to continue using Zoom for sessions like this, then that's a cost that we'll have to continue to do. Hardware supplies, $5,800 for hardware supplies, and then $7,000 for contracted services. So we use what's called an E-rate consultant now. The prior director did not do this, but it makes it really easy and efficient to make sure that when you spend $121,000 of the government's money, that everything is done absolutely correct. Because if you mess up one thing and you send that form in, they could turn back and say, we're not going to reimburse you for this and you got to pay for it yourself. So having that consultant, knowing all the new regulations to E-rate really helps. So that's one of the reasons why we did that. And here's a quick little slide on, so contracted services at 3%. Our network maintenance and internet access is at 9%. Software and hardware is at 36%. And our personnel is at 53%. Currently, it's just me and my technician. Unfortunately, my technician is moving to North Carolina now. So I am in search for a new technician. When I first started here, not only was it brand new for me, but we also lost the prior technician. So, it was new for both of us. So there's a lot of training that gets going through having a new person and onboarding them. So that's just another big thing that's kind of on my plate to get a new technician on board, ready to go. Okay, so our previous budget was $281,566. We have an increase to $335,852, and that's a $54,000 variance and a 19.28% increase. Again, that's mostly our software and our systems that we're looking to put into place. And did you want to go over how some of kind of already did, but how some of the software has come out of other people's budgets and kind of put into these line items?
Well, the software that came out of the other budgets, the 22 budget came with it, so
Right.
we have those correct
Okay,
numbers.
perfect.
Even moving, we touched on it a little bit earlier with, if it's a district-wide initiative, it needs to be in your department so that we can manage it better. There's only a few software line items remaining in the smaller departments, which I think will help us manage and potentially save funding in the future, because you don't have somebody from this department ordering the same thing that someone else is ordering. And I think that has occurred.
Yeah. Okay, as many questions as you like.
Okay, so, I think you answered my question. If you went back a slide or two to where he talks about what he's spending for that. Yeah. So I was wondering about the 32,000, a delta for this year under what was listed here as software curriculum. But it's really not the classroom curriculum, it's really these items that you got listed here.
Majority, yes. Yeah, and then the $11,000 increase because it's coming out of our regular budget now too, right?
So what Randy did was take all of the software programs licensing that we need, that we have, and broke it out by where it was in each school and whether or not it was district-wide. And we went through every one of those to see where it belonged in the budget. and put it in the appropriate.
But those would
Yeah.
largely be under software licenses and subscriptions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going up $1,000 or I think, or whatever, maybe more.
50.
Or 58.50. Yeah, the concern I had around these, thinking the 32,000 was also classroom related stuff. Was that, during the strategic planning process, there was this concern that like a sixth grader might have to know 10 or 12 different logins for programs and stuff. And that there was a conscious, just, effort being made through the strategic plan to try to see how we could streamline that and not just have every teacher go out and say, hey, I really want this or this or this or this, and all of a sudden their class has 3 more logins for social studies or whatever.
Yes.
And so I was thinking that this reflected that. Now, the 72,000 figure might reflect a lot of this. It's coming from older, much different departments. But that would be a future goal, to be looking at how we can streamline the amount of stuff a kid has to log into. I don't know about characterizing it, Ronnie and Laura, you were on the strategic plan, but that was kind of the issue, was the sheer number of things a kid would be expected to have to know.
Yes, I'm glad you bring that up, because there is an application that we use in the elementary school right now. It's called Clever. And what Clever allows you to do is kind of that thing that you're thinking of. So you go to the Clever website, it's one website that you go to, and it has every application that you would use. And a lot of them are single sign-on. So single sign-on through Google. So you would click on whatever app that you want, and it would automatically log you in. It also tracks how many times that application is being used. So that's another piece that we really didn't have. How often are people going in and using these particular sites? So it was already implemented in the elementary school. I'd like to roll that out next year for the middle and the high school. Because a lot of the times the kid would go home and the parent would say, well, what website is that? Where do you get to for that? How do you get to that? Having that one website where all the applications that you have access to are right there at your fingertips, and then being able to click on it and just go to it is amazing. Because there are some parents that go, I didn't know you had access to Code Monkey or whatever site it is. And now they're like, oh yeah, I didn't know that either. So now they can go in, they can start utilizing it and see what's good about the site. So there are tools that we're looking to implement to do that in the high school as well.
And one of the things that I think would be worth having the conversation is whether or not we want to continue the subscription to Zoom. With the conversion to so many of these Google products now, we have Google Meet, but it integrates well with all the other products and services that we get from Google. So, we can kind of use Google to do what Zoom does now, which we're already paying for anyway, so we could probably save ourselves about $10,000 right there, right? Any reason to keep Zoom?
The only thing I can think of, one is the teachers, because they're used to using Zoom, they know how to use Zoom. But Google Meet's really the same thing. They just, set up an event and do that. It's actually easier because when they schedule a calendar event, it's automatically in there for the calendar event. So if they just add a student's name, it will automatically populate. So they don't have to figure out what's the code and what's this and what's that. They literally just log into their Google, see their calendar and click on it, and then Google Meet would be right there. So it does make it easier for teachers. But I'm always trying to be careful now because I'm implementing so many new things. And teachers sometimes, they tend to, it's like, oh my God, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? So I'm just trying to be careful and be cognizant of what they're going through all of this. So the only other thing that Google doesn't provide is that it only allows you to have 250 participants in a webinar. And for an event like this, I think that should be okay, but I'm not 100% sure. They are looking to update that to 500, but it's not currently at that stage.
You're underestimating the popularity of school committee meetings.
the school committee may want to retain a Zoom subscription for some of the security and I think more sophisticated meeting management that it offers, but a subscription for the school committee would be significantly cheaper than a subscription for LPS.
Yeah, let me look into that for you, we'll get some pricing.
Yeah, I guess it'd be a few
I think-
$100s.
Yeah, and I think what bumped up the price on Zoom was when we went to the webinar.
Yes.
The webinar portion of it, because we were not able to kind of control the meetings the way that we would want to and have it organized
Right.
the way that we wanted
We
to
couldn't
do,
have more
and
than
that's what
100
jumped the
people
price
involved.
up for.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, I have an organization I work with has a webinar subscription for up to, I think it's up to 300 users, for like $150 a month or something. So anyway, point being it's a little more à la carte than just having to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
But I do have a question, so, if you're not, so thinking more families, not so much kids, kids will have a Lenox PS email, which would be Gmail based,
Yep,
right?
yep.
It looked like a Lenox PS, but it's a Gmail, correct?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're a family member, someone in the community that doesn't have a Gmail.
Yep.
And you say there was gonna be a offering Zoom because the teacher was gonna do a presentation, I don't know, something
Yep.
where families are accessing. Conferences, whatever, are they able to do that through Google Meet?
Yes.
Even if you're not a Gmail?
It's exact same place in the link, they can come in, all the tools and features are virtually the same, it'd be interesting to actually get a list and see, the
Yeah.
breakdown of what differences are, because we also moved away from Zoom in a previous organization to Google for the security reasons, because there was issues with people, hacking into Zoom and interrupting meetings and things, so.
Drawing on that
Yeah.
presentation.
We started the spring of 2020 with Google Meet. So all the teachers used it.
Okay.
One narrower question is it sounded like you're saying the plans to essentially use 5-year allotment of E-rate grant all this year?
Yeah, so that's all they give you is that $121,000 for 5 years. And we're in the second year now. So because the wireless access points are gonna be 75,000 and then the managed firewall for added security is gonna be 40,000. We've already now utilized up our full amount of funding for E-rate. It doesn't mean obviously we can't purchase things on our own through capital budget, but it just means that that portion that they'll pay for is now has been depleted for the next 3 years. Yeah, makes sense.
Just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
I didn't see that tech upgrade you're looking for in this budget. Where is it here?
There was a listing in the capital budget and also in the ESSER grant, there is technology infrastructure upgrades.
So the upgrade stuff you listed there, $120,000 worth, that is being spent from other areas of
Yes,
from the capital
yes.
budget and from,
It will be from ESSER, the ESSER 3
Yeah.
grant, the new one has infrastructure maintenance in there for technology, and capital budget for next year also has some technology needs in it. The
But it
22 budget always, we always try
are
to
there
keep.
recurring conference with the WAPs? Are there recurring costs associated with those WAPs, license fees for them?
So what I'm hoping is
Pop up here next
to get
year?
a 3-year term. So then when that 3-year term is up, we'll be in a new year for E-rate, and then we'll be able to pay for those licenses through that.
Can I ask, wow, is
Wireless
wireless
access
access
point,
point? Okay,
yeah.
thank you. Just trying to keep up. Thank you.
And
Do we do any kind of analysis like Aruba for wireless? or,
Actually,
Juniper versus?
Yeah, so I went through 5 different companies. HP Aruba was 2 companies that did HP Aruba. Extreme Networks, and there was 2 more, Meraki, and there was one other. And after seeing the HP and Aruba demo, and they have a lifetime warranty on their equipment, and they have the newest wireless technology, which is called 802.11.8x, which is Wi-Fi 6. It made the most amount of sense to go with the HP Aruba product. So yeah, I got demos on all.
this is actually probably more a question for Mark than for you, because I think within the confines of how to run a technology department, in a very disciplined way, this seems really well prepared. My concern is more the extent to which we seem to be pivoting to or adopting a very technology intensive model in our schools. You know, it seems like even in the very young grades, the default is now that the teacher has a PowerPoint up for various parts. Every kid has a Chromebook. We're trying to make sure we have, I'm assuming this is building-wide wireless in Morris as well as LMHS. I'm both sort of, as a kind of cultural matter, a little bit concerned about that as the model for the school. And then also as a pedagogical matter, I don't think there's really any evidence this is actually generating better outcomes. I mean, certainly at the macro level, you know, our schools are not better at teaching kids than they were a generation ago. So I worry a little bit, what is this all for? And again, not as a budget constraint question. If you told me it's actually going to cost twice as much to not use all the technology, I would have the exact same question. And so, you know, this may not be the right conversation, particularly at this time of night to have the discussion, but I do wonder what the sort of, to what extent this is kind of accomplishing the goal of being technology enabled versus actually creating a better school.
Again, it depends on how much time we have, but it's an important question. I think Dave Pugh alluded to a little bit with the talk about less reliance on smart boards. And I think that that's something that we do see, especially when you move into one-to-one technologies, that it is less, you know, quote unquote, stand and deliver. Like, you know, so when you talk about, you know, a teacher putting something on a PowerPoint like that, and, you know, displaying it to the class, like that's no different than using the old bulb-based overhead projectors, right? Like, and if that's what we're using the technology for, to me, that's a massive waste of money to do something that we could have done with these old bulb projectors, right? So when we think about technology, we really want to think about using it in a skillful way so that it's not just substituting paper and pencil, right? Because if it's doing that, then we should just buy paper and pencil. But it really should, at the very least, augment what we do, but really modify and redefine what we can do in schools. So how is the learning changing by having technology? Am I able to model things that I couldn't do before? Am I able to go places that I could never physically go to? Like those types of things, are students able to create new things or take knowledge and analyze it and then recombine it in a new way? Like that's what we want kids to be doing with technology, not using it just to substitute what they've always done with pen and paper. And so, you know, I think that we want to get the balance of technology to, I don't know what you want to call like non-technology teaching, but you know, we want to try to get that balance right, especially for young learners, right? Because we also do have some evidence that says that students do learn to read better from books, you know, than they do online, and that your brain actually operates differently when you're reading a book. You read left to right in a Z-like pattern, right? When you look at a web-based presentation of text, even though there's text on that screen, the way that we take that in is and process that is different. So we kind of look at the white space, then we zoom to the middle, then we zoom over here. So you know, it's a different skill set and it uses our brains in different ways. And so I think that there's a balance because we have to, I think, acknowledge and accept the fact that we live in a world that has technology, evidence for the fact that all of us have one open right now, right? So, and two folks are at home, right? So zooming in. So that's part of what we do in real world, you know, application. But at the same time, I think there's lots of other skills we still need to learn, you know, in a more analog fashion. So, you know, I think there has to be a balance of that. And I think that all parents are concerned with the amount of screen time their kids get. I know that, you know, that's something that we face as a family, right? And so, you know, I hear your point, and I think that it's one of the things, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, just as an exercise, you know, first time through this budget cycle, like it was important to go through and even look at what are we using it, how are we using it, why are we using it, is it enhancing education? So there was a program that we had called Brain Pop, which is basically like a web-based quiz show that's completely random, not tied to the curriculum, and we said, no, we're not going to continue to purchase this thing. It might be fun, but it's ultimately a time filler, and it's not furthering what we want kids to know and be able to do. And so, we decided to end that subscription. So, we do need to be, I think, very mindful of the way that we're using technology in ways to do things we couldn't do without the technology. Like that, it should be a game changer for learning. It shouldn't just be something that, it's just one more thing cluttering up the desk, right? So, and again, I think that's something that we have to continue to work on. I think that's something that, as we continue to grow in our curriculum review, something that we have to really think about. I think one of the things that was oversold and never really realized was this idea that, we were gonna go to textbooks, go away from textbooks. And probably about 20 years ago, even maybe like 10 years ago, all the publishing companies thought that they were doing that. And in fact, some of them got out and said, we're not gonna publish anything in paper form anymore. It's gonna only be online. And the pushback has been pretty hard against that. So, I don't see that, the tea leaves are saying we're, moving away from textbooks anytime soon. So, we wanted that balance. And again, we want to use this in really, I think, productive ways to do those things that we couldn't do. I don't think the robotic team could have, programmed the robot without using the computer. That would have been pretty difficult to pull off. But again, to sit there and read a piece of literature, I don't need to do it on the screen.
Mark, can I jump in too?
Yeah.
I think part of this too, Warren, is when we're thinking about this sort of like off ramp to COVID, I think we think about more of the infrastructural aspects of it. When do we get rid of masks? When do we put the cafeteria back? But I also think that particularly starting next year, we really have to scrutinize and evaluate some of the habits we picked up through that, which is that reliance on technology and sort of that crossover of being remote, that I think we have developed some bad teaching and learning habits that need to be broke because of that. And again, it's no one's fault, and it's a result of, a global pandemic. So it's very understandable. And I think there's a hesitancy on the part of the faculty right now, which is, I'm not going to really kind of move away from this because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, which is a very understandable mindset right now. But I think as we get, and I was thinking to myself the other day, this is the longest time we've been uninterrupted in learning in the physical building. This is the longest amount of time in over 2 years. Thank you.
Oh my God.
But having said that, I think as we go into next year, and I think hopefully have a little bit more certainty, I think we really, through our evaluative process, have to start asking these harder questions of, with it, like Randy's budget is incredible and really supports everything that we need. But I think that's when we start looking at it from a teaching and learning lens of like, to Mark's point, is this really enhancing, or could this actually be done and get off the screens? Because that is a big concern, and we see it. Our kids are really good in Lenox. It's the best school I've ever worked in, especially when I'm in the cafeteria. Like, our students are hardly ever on their phones. It's really impressive, honestly.
Yeah, that's true.
And it is really nice to see like the conversations. And I don't know if that could be a pandemic related of just like, hey, I'm actually able to interface with this person in the physical realm. So I'm going to take advantage of that. And I see that as, a real kind of blessing now. But I do very much understand your point, and it is a concern that I share, as I kind of look through classrooms and you walk by and you see Chromebooks open and you kind of wonder to yourself, okay, like, could that be in a different way? Like, what's the usage with that? Like, how much screen time are they getting?
Can I ask a question then to better frame it for my own self in thinking about Oren's questions? And I agree with the philosophical discussion about it, but if people are asking me on the street or the budget, you're spending all this money because that's what comes up. So it seems to me what I'm hearing, and remember we've been 2 years or so in a pandemic, and before that also in changeover in leadership. So often when we're changing systems, we want leadership, it requires research, it requires leadership. And again, not that our interim superintendent wasn't doing it, but we've had a lot of that. So is some of this kind of hitting a measure right now because there's been new evaluation of the tools we're using? How is it impacting the parents? Maybe it impacted them particularly bad. And I guess I'm saying that because I had experience before COVID of trying to assist a family member who was struggling with education, and I was like, I can't find anything. So when I have another child in my household who's very tech savvy, she can go through and she can work with you and figure it out. But a child who struggles with support at home that doesn't have an adult or another person that knows how to navigate it. So I guess my point is, it seemed like there were a lot of these problems about how families access that became monumentally noticeable during COVID, but they were already there. And what it seems like you're describing was, is really kind of an overall of the whole system, with updated technology to bring us forward and to bring us onto the same, like, so we're kind of speaking, I don't speak their language, but so we're kind of speaking the same language. Like, I definitely found that the problems we see in the website now, which of course is the old system, is we can't find things. It's not a criticism of any person. Maybe the software is better or whatever, so it feels a little bit like some of this is, I don't want to say one time, because you're describing the way technology always has to be updated, but it's a particularly critical redesign, reshift about how we're doing things systemically.
Yes.
In other words, it has an impact in the classroom, grading and all of that, how parents access, but it's a systemic shift. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think part of that too is, like, I have 2 kids that go to Pittsfield, and I don't ever go to the website because all of the information, you know, is pushed to me. So all of that stuff, I never had a reason to go to the website because the communication is constant, right? So I don't have to do that. However, when you have people that are looking to come to Lenox that have no idea what Lenox offers, you really want to have a great website to attract them to come here. So with shifting this and moving forward with an updated system and a system that's not currently housed in one of our schools. So our website is run internally on one of our servers. The server could crash at any time. Something could happen to that server. Where if it's already in the cloud, someone's updating it, we don't have to worry about the security on it because someone else is already doing it. It's just putting those kind of systems into the cloud to make everything easier. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it does, but I guess what I'm talking about, it seems like there's sort of a critical coalescence of expenditures related to this shift from one way of doing things to another way of doing things. Is that accurate?
Well, I think for the longest period of time, Mike was trying to make everything work for the least amount of money. And that's great. But what happens is, and I can speak to this because I took over for him, anyone taking over for him would have no idea about any of these systems that he put together. So for me, I had to learn a lot of these applications, and coming from a prior district, I know that there's better applications out there, but you have to spend some money to get those applications up and running.
Okay.
So once these are up and running, it's going to really make everything a lot easier for everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the way that some of the systems in the past are kind of duct taped together, we couldn't move anything or it would fall apart, right? So we literally couldn't update Redick, or we're, I don't know how many updates behind, because if we did, it would break all of those programs that Mike ran to move information in and out. So, you know, like, things that you would think would be easy to get, you know, are headaches for Amy, because we don't even have one database for the district. There's a separate database for Lmmhs and a separate one for Morris. And so now we need to take everything from both of those places, put it in a third place, you know, then analyze it. I mean, and sometimes then put it back where we got it from. So, you know, some of what we do is very inefficient, and we lose lots of man hours on silly tasks that take, you know, a significant amount of time. And it's taking away from instructional leadership and some of the other things we really want to get to in schools, because we're working through some of these things. So I think that there was a lot of that. I think there's some technology that's literally at the end of its life cycle. And there were some places where we were literally just like, you know, sticking our holes where the leaks were and hoping that, you know, the dam wouldn't break.
Yeah, so that to me feels like, in my lingo, is we're thinking about systemic shifts that every organization has to go through every now and then. We're like, okay, we're at a place where we have to reevaluate the way we're doing things. And that does have a budget sensitive part to it.
And I think for me too, is just the fact of knowing that if I ever leave this district, someone coming in will have the knowledge about these types of systems. It's not a homegrown system that somebody made from scratch to be able to get it to work. I want that transition someday to be very easily handed off to the next person.
When your fourth grader graduates from high school or college, then we could think about maybe.
So there you go.
Thank you for that. So
Yeah.
sometimes the translation for conversations out in the world
Yeah.
is helpful.
I would say honestly, Ronnie, it's bringing us up to what our peers are. Honestly, like having worked in other districts before and always having Power School, always having Gmail. I like had to look up when Mike first said to me, oh, we use Rediker. I had no idea what that was, you know, and Rediker, the version we have, looks like what I had when I started teaching in 2007. You know, so that's, I think, the narrative is that this is bringing us on par with our peers. Like there's nothing groundbreaking with this, but it's definitely putting us on a good even playing field, you know. And Randy said to me too, you know, it's nice because with Power School, all the other districts, it gives Randy a really good support network of peers, of other IT specialists. Hey, like we're looking to do this. You know, he can just call someone in Pittsfield or up at Greylock and say, hey, like we're like, can you help me through this? Which is nice from, you know, a peer, you know, support group for something like that.
And I think there's two other things that maybe like the average person in the street doesn't recognize, right? And one is that, yes, we're educating children and that's the business we're in, right? But we're also running a business, right? And so we need to make sure that our networks are secure and that they work reliably, because paying our employees may not be like the most, you know, fun or outward facing part of what we do to the public, but it's really important to our teachers who rely on getting a paycheck every week. Making sure that we are held, you know, ransom by, you know, a hacker is pretty important to us. Being able to conduct school committee meetings, you know, to run the district. These are things we want to make sure continue to work. And some of these things, you know, we've learned throughout this year, we're at some pretty significant risks. I don't want to put too much out there, but you know, there were some things that we found surprising from a security and safety networking side of things that, you know, really needed to be addressed so that we can continue to do business in ways that are predictable and safe. Like when things are boring and the trains run on time, no one ever thinks about it, but we want to be able to be boring and keep the trains running on time. So the district works well, you know, and I know that it's probably not the most fun thing to talk about, but it's work that had to happen.
It also makes me think about, there's been so many conversations about federal and state grants, and then also about DESI reporting. The reality is we're in an environment, the entire environment is everything is about sending the reports, and that data is now all living. It's not in paper anymore, yay, but it still has to be processed, culled, reported, like we were talking about with Amy or whomever is having to create these. So applying for grants, all of those things seems like it's coming, and the more it can be streamlined, the more we could potentially also access funding that.
And the MCAS test itself is now given online, right? So kids, there's another reason why we have to use computers occasionally too, because kids have to know how to read and respond online, that's how tests are delivered. But then you also have adequate bandwidth to be able to fire up all the computers at the same time, and redundancy that if there's a crash, that stuff's stored somewhere so that all that work isn't lost, right? So all of these new angles and dimensions that are constantly thrown at us in schools, which again, aren't always the most, you know, fun and exciting topics, but they're just the, you know, the brutal realities of running a school district today.
And this started, you know, the database conversation started in the 2020 year. You know, 1920, we were having these conversations with Mike. So we paused because we didn't know what to expect, but we're very happy to hear that they're on the table.
And we know some of it's a pain point, but you know, it will be better on the other side, you know, and it'll be a lot better for our folks. It'll be easier to schedule schools and these types of things, and there's just other functions that'll be more efficient in the future too, especially with Power School. I mean, there's ways that it can organize all of your, you know, mandatory paperwork to fill out in the beginning of the year, like parents can log into all of that, you know, immunizations, all those types of things can all be handled, so.
You don't have to fill out the tiny little cards in triplicate?
Right, and those are the kind of things that we're talking about, you know, even some of, yeah, we have a lot of things that are filled out on carbon copies, so. we'd like to try to streamline some of that. And it's hard, I think, from another angle too, is that we're a very flat organization. Lots of people are pulling double, triple, quadruple duties, doing all kinds of things. And so, wherever we can economize and streamline, it really helps people. Like someone like Amy, I don't know how she makes it through her day sometimes because she's just pulling so many directions, right, or Melissa, so these things help a lot and just making those folks' lives a little easier. We're pulling duty in every possible direction. We don't have deep departments, and some places we don't even have departments.
So what's next? Maintenance and operations, that where we're at now?
You did that last one.
Yeah, we did
Oh,
have
that's-
some.
Yeah, no, we're done with the presentations for the night.
Thank
It's only been 3 hours.
Thank
We could probably go another hour if you want, but.
We'll just be back here
I
tomorrow.
was gonna say, we're getting on Mars on a little.
Yeah, so, thank you for your
Thank you very
presentations.
much.
And tomorrow, I said at the beginning of the meeting that my intent was not to have public comment, because I think that the 7 of us represent a lot of viewpoints and we have a lot of information. And I've had some pushback, just during the meeting, I've had some pushback. Somebody saying, well, why don't you spend the first half hour having, people, an even number of people on each side, but I'm not sure there's 2 sides. I think there's a bunch of potential viewpoints, which I think the 7 of us probably represent reasonably well. So I'm not of an inclination to open it for public comment. Now,
Is that something, Bob, that you think you have to, I'm not trying to, I put it down, a note to look it up, because I question as to whether you have that,
no, you do.
discretion in
Yeah.
the context of a public meeting.
Yeah, no,
To
you
say no
have the
public
ability to say whether you're gonna have it or not.
Okay, perfect, thank you, and
and-
I don't have to look it up.
And I'm just a little bit concerned that if we open up, it's not just a matter of, yes, we're gonna do this, or no, we're not gonna do this, because I think there's a lot of potential sides, and to be fair to be taking the public, which I think is gonna be large, and synthesize it down to maybe 3 speakers from this and 3 speakers from this and 3, where I think that, with the information that's been sent around by Warren, by me, by Mark, by others, I think we have stuff to reflect on. Survey went out to parents, so I'm not inclined to have public comment, but I would, while we're still convened here, if people feel otherwise, let me know.
Well, I think you're right that the sort of, and I think Tri-Town had this experience with their recent meeting that public comment can go off the rails sometimes. But I do think hearing what people are saying, giving them that opportunity is incredibly important. And so I guess just one suggestion is if we could make clear that we're welcoming written comment and actually circulate that to everybody, even if it's by noon tomorrow. I guess at this point, there's not much time before noon tomorrow. But I do think people who have something that they want to share with the committee do need that opportunity. And then it could be up to committee members to bring up something that they think is relevant that they want to raise.
I would agree with you, Warren, but I would actually go so far as to say that I think that although we've answered the question about whether we have that discretion, I think the question becomes, if we're talking about openness and transparency and trying to consider sides, I mean, I think that there are a lot of nuanced discussions about this, and shutting down discussion is one of the things that I think has been happening in been a complaint that people make about, oh, you shut down discussion, and when we're modeling good discourse and the last time we had a conversation about masks last summer, that I think many of us were thinking we weren't gonna be having that conversation. I think we had a great community that for the most part, I mean, really even people that had views that many of us didn't agree with, or some people didn't agree with, I think the respect and appropriateness of the comments, some people avoided duplicate comments. I don't think it went on very long, so I would really advocate that we do something. If we say, okay, it's gonna be very short, 15 minutes or something, or we ask not for overly duplicative comments, I think that makes sense, but I really feel that the concept of lessening discourse rather than increasing it is not the best modeling. I mean, our community in Lenox has really shown an ability, even with disagreements, to come together and compromise and do what we've needed to do. And I think when I was at the school, MASC meeting, and people talked about some pretty bad behavior, what I've said is, oh, a school committee, that must be awful, people are so, and I said, no, I think our community mostly can come together and have really, I mean, I don't even want to say mostly, I think there are people I disagree with, but I've never felt that concern for wellness or safety or went on too long. I think, I don't know, I feel strongly that discourse is important and can be, we've, you know, can be limited in a way that still encourages transparency and openness.
So it sounds like people are in favor of having some comment, public comment. Or, yeah,
I think that would be this, we do like a short,
Yeah.
15-minute, and then give everybody a time allotment when they start, 2 or 3 minutes, and.
well, if we're gonna say 15 minutes, then I'm gonna say 1 minute.
Well, can we have an idea ahead of time of how many people are? Ask them to sign up, for example, if they're on Zoom or something, I can't see that Zoom part, sorry, Christine. No, I didn't talk over you. Yeah. To sign up perhaps, or let us know that they want to speak and their address or whatever, we could.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could send another message out.
You might be able to do that with a Zoom poll right at the beginning and have an idea of the number, just do you wish to speak tonight?
Well, that's actually a good point, is that usually there's sort of, everybody waits and then raises their hand after the next person. If you just say, we'll know if there's anybody here, you just say, anybody who wants to make public comment.
Like the online version of Clipboard, I mean.
No,
so like in a
there's a
meeting.
raise hand
Yeah.
function, they
Yeah.
can just all hit raise hand, and that's
take the
line
order.
From the beginning. But Ryan,
I want to make one comment. I kind of considered the survey as public comment.
Yeah.
Want to throw that out there.
We have had input through the survey, and it's true. I mean, so it's a matter of balancing that with the, I like the idea of having some sort of limits on it. I think that's our goal, is to just keep things constructive and not going off the rails.
I thought Ronnie put the point really well that modeling good discourse is itself actually really important. So I think if we pick a time limit and say, that might mean we don't get to everybody, but I think that actually does all value.
Okay, well, I think I would set a time limit of 20 minutes. I do need you all to know that I do have an important meeting at 7 o'clock, so an hour and a half is what I can stay, and the meeting can go longer. But I have a meeting where I need to get a vote and discuss some things with the school building committee, so and a couple other people are part of that. Several of us are part of that.
Hey,
So-
Bob, can I just have I just want to comment on the public comment. I don't know if you open something to public well, maybe you can. I don't know the rules on this. I don't know if you if the restriction needs to be on the duration of the individual comment, or if it's the duration of the comment period.
It's usually.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it out.
Maybe both. You can say we're taking comments for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. And our typical policy says 3 minutes per speaker. We haven't always adhered to that. But I would say for tomorrow, 2 minutes per speaker, 20 minutes time. That would give 10 people a chance to speak. And then, and close it off at 5:50. And then begin our discussion.
How will you determine which 10 get to speak?
I have no clue. I mean, I have a clue. Obviously, the hands raised thing is one thing, but if we have 35 people who raise their hands.
Again, I think I've experienced people being like, you know what? I don't need 2 minutes, 5 people have spoken and I agree, I just want to say, I agree with Bob Munch or something, you know what I mean? I do think people have shown us their ability to align and come together as a group or whatever, we've seen that.
Yeah. we had-
Parents
we
writing
had-
a letter
we had a
and
meeting
signing
last
it
year where the
together.
public comment went for an hour.
What's that?
We had a meeting last year with the public comment went for about an hour.
Yeah, we've had multiple experiences of
Yeah.
varying sorts.
I guess you're right, I came into that part of it later.
Yeah.
All right, well,
Okay, all right, so,
I think we have a good plan.
okay, very good. I think, guess I accept the motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, this calls for a roll call vote. David Rimler,
David Rimler, aye.
Veronica Fenton, aye.
Christine Morrow, aye.
Bob Lunch, aye.
Or Cass, I.
Bob Vaughn, aye. We're adjourned.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.